Now it's time for the big one. The record button is hit. It's time for the GIGACHADS counter. Next, pull up in the Vanquisher we trust. Okay, it will be after Norway. Now it's time for the big one. The main reason we are all here. Norway, the Forgotten Battle of World War II by Animarchy History. And a nearly 2 hour long video. With the way I am, it will be probably 3 hour long video on YouTube. And for the YouTube people who will be watching the upload, remember, it will be probably 3 hour, because I will be stopping every 5 to 10 seconds, because of the way I am, because of the way I want to say, and because I am also reading chat. Yep, it's time for today's feature presentation. It's time. I have some good old gamer juice with me in my hand. Let's go.
It's the start of the year 1940.
My ears.
The phony war is in full swing. The border between France and Germany is all quiet, while Red Army and Wehrmacht troops hold joint parades celebrating their victory over Poland. Yet even as Europe sits dormant, with air forces doing nothing but dropping propaganda leaflets, the war at sea is raging. And on this lazy winter evening, a tense standoff is taking place in the cold, dark waters of Scandinavia. This part of World War II's history is largely forgotten in modern popular histories, so much so that the latest and greatest Netflix documentary about World War II edited this chapter out entirely. It appears nowhere in the entire documentary. Yet the effect it had on the war is absolutely massive, all while being a story unlike any other, with some of the most incredible feats of martial skill and heroism. Feats so insane, you would dismiss them as Hollywood fantasy had they not been witnessed and recorded for posterity. So today, I will set about fixing this glaring oversight and tell you the long but exciting story of the German invasion of Norway. Get some refreshments, get comfortable, and prepare for a tale like no other, because
and
I promise you...
Animarchy History is trying to bring... And I like Animarchy History are trying to bring this to more people. Is trying to bring this to more people. Your autocorrect is a curse, Jake. It's one hell of a curse. Maybe we'll change the live chat widget for the reaction base. Who knows? Experimenting is always good. It's always good, whatever. I know.
It's a story worth
you kept
hearing.
that one on purpose.
How worth hearing, you might ask? Well, we're good.
One quick question. Those presented here as the protagonist? Wait, what? Wait, you mean about the Norway people or whatever? The Norwegians? Probably they are the protagonists in the story. I mean, this is literally Norway, the forgotten battle. The battle for Norway. So, maybe they are.
GIGACHADS
GIGACHADS
counter
counter.
has been sponsored by the world's fastest and most popular VPN service provider, NordVPN. In today's
Does the GIGACHADS counter answers your
of it now, and let's be honest, as an ad service effect.
Exactly, okay, let's skip the ad.
As an ad, 6 block lists. So your information get out now, you can get 4 months, so you literally have nothing to lose by giving them a try. So please do, I appreciate all the help I can get. Now, back to the video.
Okay, let's hear it. 16th February 1940. Okay.
As the sun sat low on the horizon that February evening, an international incident of crisis-like proportions
Say
was
no
starting
more.
to take
Exactly.
shape. HMS Cossack of His Majesty's Royal Navy was staring down the fully armed launches of 2 Norwegian torpedo boats, the Skarv and the Kajel. The cause of this confrontation being the British violation of their neutrality and their territorial waters to chase down a German freighter. A German freighter named the Altmark, who was even then trying to slink away from the scene. It's worth noting that the prelude to this incident is just as convoluted as the incident itself. Altmark had been a freighter supporting the pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee in the South Atlantic, which had been achieving great success in sinking Allied merchant traffic. The issue was, at this point in the war, both sides were still trying to play the public opinion card on the world stage, as the mass murders...
Even back then, they were trying to appeal to public opinion. The war never changes, isn't it? The war never fucking changes. Yeah.
carpet bombings, and brutal sieges
Whatever.
hadn't happened yet, meaning all the conventions and rules agreed upon prior to the war were being scrupulously followed, including cruiser rules and prize rules. Any ship engaged in neutral or international waters had to be searched before engaging, and any ship sunk according to the laws of war must have its crew rescued. As such, Altmark, having completed its resupply of Graf Spee, was ordered to collect the British POWs from the sunken vessels and transport them to Germany for internment, taking an extreme northern route around Scotland and into Norwegian waters to avoid getting caught by the Royal Navy, who were then in pursuit of Graf Spee, or the Royal Air Force's coastal command patrols. The irony of all this was that they had actually managed their escape because the British had already found Graf Spee and were focusing their efforts on destroying her rather than her support units nearby, which they achieved by tricking the Graf Spee's captain into sinking his own ship, by trapping him in the mouth of the River Plate, and then broadcasting on open channels that a whole armada was coming in to destroy them with aircraft carriers and everything, even though Force H from Gibraltar was 3,000 miles away, and they could have easily fought their way out before they showed up. But the captain of Graf Spee didn't know that, and so yep, the Royal Navy tricked the Germans into sinking their own battlecruiser. Fast forwarding back to the present, after all of this
Okay, that's one hell of a start for this story. Not bad at
drama,
all.
the Altmark, carrying the prisoners of the ships Graf Spee had sunk,
The Royal Navy casted gaslight in Lamau. Exactly.
has now been spotted and subsequently cornered by HMS Cossack, who, thanks to British intelligence, knows the ship's cargo. Needless to say, they wanted their sailors back.
Huh.
Now, the Norwegians had searched the vessel several times over its transit through their waters, and they hadn't found anything, so they had begun escorting it towards German-controlled waters to maintain their neutrality. But in keeping with his now famous persona, the First Lord of the Admiralty, one Winston Spencer Churchill,
Hello there.
had other ideas. There had been a consistent fracas among the Allied High Command about German sea trade in Scandinavia and the Baltic. It was very clear that their Nordic commerce was vital to their war effort, yet no one could really agree on what to do about it. Churchill, of course, advocated for the most extreme actions possible in taking the fight to Hitler. But naturally, his reputation for adventurism after Gallipoli didn't lend much strength to his argument. It was then Altmark came to his rescue. The Kriegsmarine transporting prisoners of war through Norwegian territorial waters was a violation of their neutrality, at least in the eyes of the British Admiralty, which gave Churchill an opening. He ordered HMS Cossack to mount a rescue mission, preferably with the cooperation of the Norwegian Navy. However, crucially, it wasn't a requirement. He just asked the ship's commanders to make sure they don't shoot at them.
Okay.
HMS Cossack then signalled to the Norwegians and Altmark that they would initiate a boarding action unless the Norwegians joined them in escorting the Altmark to Bergen, where they would organise the retrieval of their sailors. The Norwegians immediately protested this, of course, as this would violate their neutrality and appear as an act of collusion with the Allies, which was likely to enrage the Germans.
Oh.
But at the same time, they also made the sound judgment that firing at the most powerful navy in the world was, on balance, not an intelligent course of action, and thus the Norwegians withdrew from the area.
The most powerful
With their
navy
primary
at the
diplomatic
moment.
obstacle gone, HMS Cossack pulled up alongside the Altmark, its crew brandishing all manner of battle implements, including bayonets, heavy tools from engineering, and, if rumours are to be believed, a ceremonial cutlass kept aboard for special occasions.
Eh, what?
And at 22:20 hours, the Royal Navy's saltiest seamen in the finest traditions of their service stormed aboard the German vessel, cutting down 8 of the crew and wounding 10 more in a quick but violent
Yep, till America showed up. Yeah.
assault, gaining control of the ship within minutes. They immediately began searching the various holds and compartments until they got to the main storage area, where one of the boarders yelled out, "Any Englishmen here?" To which a loud yell came back, "Yes, we're all British," promptly followed by a line which was used in propaganda throughout the whole war. "Well, chaps, the Navy's here." A line greeted with rapturous cheers from the newly liberated sailors. Yet while a
Nice.
tremendous coup in military terms, diplomatically, it was an absolute disaster. Even
All right.
Norway's pro-Allies government couldn't sanction such a blatant violation of their neutrality, which resulted in the lodging of a formal complaint to His Majesty King George as foreign press organizations around the world criticized Britain for this rash and violent action. Yet despite the ferocious uproar of public opinion and the disastrous diplomatic implications of such an event, which quickly began manifesting themselves, as the rigmarole of public theatre played out on the world stage, no one had any idea the scale of the crisis they had just set into motion.
Oh, really? February 20th, 1948. That was like 3 days?
Adolf Hitler was a very angry man.
Yeah.
And I mean more angry than usual, which is an...
Very angry, so angry he had to get high to express his anger. And yet USB didn't care.
achievement in of itself. An absolute typhoon of phone calls had rung out from the Reich's Chancellery, summoning the department heads of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, responsible for planning operations in Scandinavia. Hitler had previously met with the head of Norway's fascist movement, Vidkun Quisling, on December 14th,
Fucking what
who
now?
was then advocating for a coup d'etat supported by a division of German troops. Indeed, Quisling would soon become a slang term among the British public for collaborators and traitors in the aftermath of the upcoming invasion. Hitler had agreed with Quisling on principle that having a friendly government in Norway would be beneficial to Germany's national security, particularly regarding naval operations, as well as offering full protection to their maritime trade in the Baltic and the North Sea. However, Norwegian neutrality was also very useful, in the sense that as long as there was a third party able to play the victim internationally, the Allies couldn't move in without incurring a grievous diplomatic and political cost, which after the invasions of Poland and Czechoslovakia would go a long way to advancing the Nazis' position internationally. As we've seen with current events in our own time, pushing a both sides debate is an effective method of undermining support from powerful neutral nations, who may or may not sympathize with the enemy. Turning the US public on Britain is not particularly difficult to do.
Because sadly, even back then, Americans were easy to manipulate. Like the average American, that is. Even back then, apparently was an idiot. And by the average American, I mean in New Yorkers and Californians. And technically they count as Americans, but Californians, let's be honest, Californian is barely an American. Like, it's like sub-American. Can't argue that, sadly. AKA the Norwegian shield in diplomatic terms.
After all, Hitler had already won over Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford. In fact, he even gave them medals. Of course, this was due to their views on race and their much publicized anti-Semitism. The United States was not exactly progressive on racial issues at the time, and they definitely didn't have a lot of time for the English. Thus, the American public were quite happy to stay out of European entanglements, as their founding father would call it. But even with all these facts in mind, to turn public opinion against Britain and the Allied cause enough that the elected officials would be forced to abandon their support for the Allies entirely and double down on neutrality was quite another thing. The Nazis were engaged in a blatant war of aggression, and France was a traditional American ally. Not to mention rearmament was providing jobs for the United States as early as the mid-30s, getting them out of the Depression. However, if the Allies were then to suddenly themselves invade neutral nations and make war, that would certainly change up the dynamic as well as bring back the both sides discussion into the equation. But in the aftermath of the Altmark incident, as it was now being called, despite their protestations to the contrary, Hitler was convinced that the Norwegians were no longer willing to enforce their neutrality, and that their sympathies laid with the Allies. As such, there was every chance that they may join the war and pose an unacceptable threat to Germany's northern flank. This was a risk they simply couldn't take. And so, Case Nord, as it had been called, was ordered to be expanded and, more importantly, expedited. Both Denmark and Norway would need to be invaded and occupied by a task force involving what amounted to the entirety of the Kriegsmarine, combined with a small but elite force of Germany's best infantry units.
Hitler was really intelligent in those early years. Many people seem to forget that. Yeah, to be honest, Hitler, despite his blatant insanity, he was a very smart guy when it comes to strategy, and many already mentioned that if he prepared a little more years, a little more, then there's a high chance that he could win the war if he prepared a little more and if the Japanese did not touch the boat. Like, if the Japanese also did not touch the boats and Hitler prepared even a little more, like a year or two more, he would have won World War II. He would have taken all of Europe. Like, no doubt in that, in my opinion. And that's the sad part. Sanity and intelligence are not the same thing, and many people seem to think they are. Yeah, they are not the same things. Like, you can be intelligent and like of sound sanity, like of sound mind, and those are people like, for example, Einstein, Oppenheimer, like those type of people who are keeping their cool and putting in the effort for the better, and then there's the intelligent and insane like Hitler. Intelligence and sanity do come along in some way, like at some point they do like have to be close enough one with each other, but they do not the same thing. Like, they are related, like in a way, but not related close enough. You can be bad shit crazy and have insanely high IQ. Yeah, true. Like the most like out of pocket example that I can come up with right now, it's for example Eggman from the Sonic franchise. He's incredibly smart, but he's just obsessed with world domination. He's a crazy fucking man. Like, here's that one. Or maybe, I don't know, Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb. He's smart, but he's a dumbass at the same time. A good example. Yeah, the first that came to my hand.
The plan for the operation was relatively simple, and in fact there was a good reason for its simplicity. General von Falkenhorst was the man assigned to lead the operation. He was given this assignment because he was the only senior German officer with Arctic warfare experience he had gotten fighting the Soviet Union as part of a German expedition to support Finnish independence. Hitler had called von Falkenhorst into the Reichschancellery, appointed him commander, and then told him to formulate a basic plan for the Führer's consideration by 5 PM that evening. Imagine that for a second. Your boss calls you into work early, only to ask you to organize the invasion of 2 sovereign nations by close of business. It was so short notice, in fact, that Falkenhorst actually planned the entire invasion of Norway and Denmark with a tourist guidebook from the late 1920s. The invasion was to be spearheaded by the paratroopers of the 1st Fallschirmjäger Regiment, along with both the 2nd and 3rd Mountain Divisions, the Gebirgsjäger.
Okay.
They were then to be followed by no less than 6 regular infantry divisions to be either airlifted into the captured Norwegian airfields at Kjevik, Sola Stavanger, and Oslo Fornebu.
6 infantry divisions. Like, how many soldiers is that? An infantry 10 to 20,000 soldiers. So he is sending like up to between 60 and up to 120 plus soldiers into Norway and Denmark, I believe. Damn, that's a lot.
Or disembarked in the major port cities of Oslo, Bergen, Kristiansand, and Narvik. Crucially, however, these units were to be carried by warships instead of transports, including the 2 new battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau,
Really?
allowing them to sail much faster than regular shipping, minimizing their exposure to discovery and attack by the Royal Navy, while also giving them a fighting chance should they be intercepted. This rapid deployment relied primarily on surprise. Once their landing zones were secured, the invasion force was to move on critical government buildings and logistics hubs, with the Norwegian state paralyzed, their rail net seized.
Regoogle that and specify a World War II German division. Good idea. A World War II German division. Size of a World War II German division. Here it is. Of like 1 division. World War II German infantry division typically numbered at 15,000 to 70,000 men at full strength in 1939, after reduced down to 11 or 12,000 by 44-45. So we are talking about 1940 numbers, so it will be roughly... Oh wait. Panzer Tank Division generally held 11 to 14,000 men. Okay. See the size difference. Oh, yeah, exactly. Like the 20,000 plus it's today. So 15 to 17,000 men. Let's take the average amount. Let's assume it was 16,000 men each division. 16 by 6. We are looking at 96,000 soldiers. Okay, so wait. Infantry division 1949 to 1941. Initially strong, about 17 to 18 like from Germany. 17 to 18,000 personnel relying heavily on horses and transport. Okay. Up to 41, so 17 to 18,000. Here it is. It would be around 100,000 men. Yeah. 6 divisions of that size. If we are talking about early war. Oh, holy shit. Like there's another number. Here it is. Up to 18,000, let's assume. Okay, it will be like around 100,000 men. It's a lot. It's a lot, holy shit.
And their ports closed, the Wehrmacht could rapidly overwhelm Norway's relatively tiny military before they could get the opportunity to mobilize their National Guard units or their reserves. All of this would be backed up by Fliegerkorps 10 of the Luftwaffe, primarily equipped with Bf-110 Zerstörers, twin-engined fighters, heavily armed, and capable of long-range missions. This, of course, came along with the standard contingent of medium bombers, HE-111s and Dornier 17s. Air support for Operation Weserübung, as the new expanded plan was named, would be limited to just these units, as the Norwegian fighter force was comprised of just one squadron, while Denmark was practically defenseless. Not to mention the extended range of the operations due to being launched from Germany, as the Bf-109...
But I had to give that specification request to you, so you had accurate info. Yeah, thank you, Jake, because I was about to be so wrong. Holy shit.
Nines just didn't have the fuel. With the basic outline established, the OKW began refining the details of the plan until a date could be chosen, which Hitler set as April 9th, 1940. Thus, the clock began ticking down.
Less than 2 months of preparedness. Holy crap. Like, for example, the recent war with Iran that we have finished for some reason. Apparently finished, maybe not, maybe we did. Like, Trump was preparing the Operation Epic Fury and Roaring Lion from our side. We were preparing that for like ever since November, if I'm not mistaken. Like ever since the Iranian riot started, since then we started preparing for the war. So yeah, and they had less than 2 months for preparing for a land invasion in 1940. And as a fun experiment, look up a World War II division and compare it to the German one side by side. Let's assume an American World War II division. Let's assume that, like, since it will be a World War II American, yeah. World War II Infantry Division. US World War II Infantry Division size, let's see that. Okay, a US Army Infantry Division during World War II was a triangular structure comprising approximately 14 to 15,500 personnel. Those divisions were designed for high mobility. Wait. So overall total strength, a 1944 infantry division from America had over 14,000 officers and men, like overall both officers and men. Okay, a marine division. A reinforced marine division was greatly larger, averaging about 20,000 men. Damn. Oh, sorry about that. And what is a triangle structure? Reorganized from a square for regiments to triangle to regiments to become faster and more flexible. Okay. So just by size, it was like from 14 to 15,000 in army division, but marines were up to 20,000 men. Impressive, very impressive.
The day Norway would meet its fate. But there would be a final, ironic twist. Because unbeknownst to either side, it was now a race to see who would be that fate's master.
Now that 14,000 compared to 18,000 from Germany, yeah, that's an impressive difference. Like that's a lot. That's like roughly a difference in. That's a big difference. Like 30 to 40% difference. If they had like the same equipment and the same training from both sides. Sadly, the German side would have just stomped down the American side. Sadly, it ended up being very different, and we won that shit. yeah, you did, you really did. March 13 from in London, okay.
Meanwhile, back in London, for one of the very few times in his life, Adolf Hitler's rash and paranoid geopolitical ramblings were actually 100% correct.
Huh?
It turns out, while the Germans and Norwegians were collectively fuming, both the British and French high commands were locked in a ferocious debate with one another over how to best take the fight to Germany. And an operation in...
And that was while fighting a war on two fronts. Yeah, that's true. Like... so true. And the Japanese... Like, from what I've seen in the Fatal Electrician videos, the Japanese were far more ferocious than the German. Which kinda makes sense if you think about it.
In Scandinavia was foremost on their mind.
Thankfully, the Marines were even more ferocious than the Japanese were.
After the Altmark incident,
we
Churchill
were fighting in the Pacific while we invaded Europe. Lol. Yeah. Fucking logistical flexing.
Intensified his campaign for a direct intervention in Scandinavia, not just in Norway, but across the whole region. Just as they had in World War I, the Royal Navy immediately moved to blockade Germany from all international trade, and they had done so most effectively. In fact, it was far easier this time, as there was no longer a giant high seas fleet to worry about. The problem was the progress made both in submarines and air power. While they could stop global shipping, they wouldn't be able to close in on the German coastline without opening themselves up to unacceptable risks of ambush and air attack, meaning domestic shipping from nearby neutral nations would be free to trade with Germany. In this specific case, iron ore from northern Sweden, which was transported via the Baltic Sea lanes far out of the Royal Navy's range. Crucially, however, there was a glaring window of opportunity. During winter, the Baltic's northern ports freeze over, meaning the mining companies need a cheap alternative method of moving their goods, namely transporting the ore by rail to warm water ports on the Norwegian North Sea coast, the biggest one being Narvik. And when you want to make steel in large quantities for, I don't know, warships, tanks, guns, shells, reinforcing struts for whatever chair Hermann Goering is sitting in, you're gonna need a lot of iron ore. Without it, your ability to arm, equip, and resupply the armed forces would be irrevocably compromised. And given that the Germans had yet to annex the various nations of Europe, whose domestic iron production could provide an alternative supply, cutting this trade route would practically shut down the German war economy, which is exactly what Churchill was advocating for.
It just goes to show that our logistics are our emphasis on independent actions at the squad level paid off in spades. It's paid off a lot. It's paid off my tongue! It's paid off a lot, yeah, it did.
But as per usual, the politics of the Grand Alliance and the unique conditions of the phony war led not to decisive action, but to dithering debate. The British were advocating attacking Germany directly, yet they weren't exactly keen on following the aggressive wishes of their First Lord of the Admiralty. Instead, the British government proposed mining every major German waterway and coastal area by air and sea. While this would not decisively halt German shipping, it would put a severe dent in their war production while respecting the neutrality of nearby nations. The problem was, of course, this would involve mining the rivers and canals throughout the Ruhr region, including the Rhine. An action which would almost certainly see...
Even though our smaller divisions were more flexible by design. Which makes sense, by the way.
Civilian vessels and kill German citizens, inciting retaliation in kind against the Allies, or rather more accurately, retaliation against the French. As you can imagine, the French weren't exactly too happy about that. Their geopolitical goals were surmounted by one overarching objective: prevent the Germans from setting foot in France at all costs. Whatever method they could use to deflect the Nazis away from France, they pushed for, and they pushed hard, to the extent that they were, ironically, in support of Churchill's more aggressive plans, as that would open up a major second front in Scandinavia and the Baltics, which would draw German troops away from any attack on the French homeland. But what was this aggressive plan? Well, ladies, gentlemen, and variations thereupon, strap yourselves in. There were two operations currently in the final stage of planning over at the Admiralty. First was Operation Wilfred, the extensive mining of Norwegian territorial waters, combined with political pressure on Scandinavian states trading with Germany. Of course, this would violate the neutrality of several nations.
Well, I mean, the scars of World War I were still fresh in France. Alright. It makes a lot of sense.
And cause a massive international incident, but the damage to the German war economy would be extensive. Extensive, but not fatal. Furthermore, the Nazis aren't exactly the most gracious or circumspect people. Churchill rightly surmised that should they take such an aggressive step, it would almost certainly prompt an immediate response. Therefore, it would make sense for the Allied forces to preemptively deploy their own troops to resist an attempted German occupation. They would do this while working on the assumption that the Norwegians wouldn't wage an armed resistance against an Allied intervention. A very brave assumption, given what we'll see later. And so, the Admiralty put together Plan R4, which looked like this. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's the German plan. And yes, it is. But if you take the Luftwaffe and the paratroopers out of it, R4 and Weserübung are almost exactly the same. Seize the major cities, secure the ports and airfields, control Narvik while cutting its rail link to Sweden. While their force was half the size of the German invasion.
Only 30 years has passed and we are beginning round 2 electric boogaloo.
In terms of total boots on the ground, roughly 3 divisions worth, they weren't expecting the need to defeat and occupy the Norwegians. And if they managed to dig in on...
And after the round 2, there was the blue ball in context... My tongue! There was the blue ball in contest. The blue ball in contest for round 3. Fucking Thunder in Grigaloo. Or whatever. I just made it up. For fuck's sake.
On the defensive, it was still a large force, and should the Allies see...
There was the Kakwar... Oh, sorry, the Cold War. Ja, the US and USSR were cacking each other with proxy wars just to make themselves feel good by watching how other nations are fighting under their influence.
The air bases in southern Norway, they could stage their own aircraft, and they would also have the necessary naval and air bases from which they could essentially cut the iron ore trade to Germany entirely. There was even a contingency for French mountain troops to seize the iron mines in northern Sweden directly, violating the sovereignty of not just one neutral nation, but 2.
I will bow and live for the next comedian law.
Needless to say, there was a considerable amount of consternation at this plan, but it was also the most aggressive operation they could mount without attacking Germany directly or compromising France's defense. So the plan was put into motion. The troops were assembled for embarkation. The ships began moving to their assembly ports. High-level briefings were held. It seemed like the Allies were finally actually going to do something. And then came the order to stand down.
Oh, come on, man.
Operation cancelled. Everything was called off. The men were disembarked, the ships back to their staging areas. It's still debated today whether the virulence of blue balls among the Allied personnel assigned to Scandinavia was due to either the constant false alarms or the awful Arctic climate. But in the specific case of Plan R4, it was because their political cover had been completely and utterly blown. For you see, while all this drama had been going on in the North Sea, Joseph Stalin, after signing an alliance of convenience with Nazi Germany, had been given free rein to pursue Soviet territorial claims in the Baltic. This included the annexation of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and eastern Poland. But one particularly sore spot for the Man of Steel was Finland. There were valuable ore mines in the northern regions of the country, starting to notice a theme here, while the Karelian Isthmus north of Leningrad posed a serious threat to the Soviet Union's second largest city should Finland align with Nazi Germany in any future conflict. Which, in fairness, given the relations between the Soviet Union and its neighbours, was well within the realms of possibility. After all, like Romania, Poland, Hungary, and the recently subjugated Baltics, the Finns had no love for the Bolsheviks. It's not like the Russian Empire turned Soviet Empire had been invading, occupying, and persecuting them all for centuries or anything. Thus, the Soviets, in a completely unique, out-of-character, totally unheard-of diplomatic justification that they definitely would never use again, faked a border crisis with artillery, declared pro-Finnish citizens in Karelia an existential threat to national security, loudly proclaimed that the government of Finland are actually an elite cabal of fascists in league with the Nazis, requiring a special military operation to annex Finnish territory as an act of self-defense to protect their national security while rescuing loyal Soviet citizens in the Karelia region.
Yeah, sounds very unfamiliar, very new, right? as if this will never happen again. It never happened before. Will never happen in the future. Yeah, right. Sounds familiar. Yeah, it sounds very familiar. Yeah, and besides, they're just Finnish. What can they do? and then, out of the snow, out of nowhere, from the snow, in the snow, comes up a 5'3" Finnish mad lad, Simo Haija, whatever his name is, and smokes out at least, how many was it? 800 fucking Soviet military personnel. Like, I have no idea how many Simo Haija had kills at least. It was at least 400, right? 549. 549 Soviet soldiers that we know of. Like, this is the amount that we know of. And then you have, what was his name? The let me look up his name. The guy who took in Pervitin. What was his name? Let me look up to the fat electrician. Let me see. Oh yeah, I really need to refresh my memories on those guys. Aimo Kvavujan. Yeah. Aimo. I remember. Aimo Kvavujan, the guy who took in meth and was totally unkillable. Like, these two together, they smoked out the Soviet out the way.
I've honestly never heard this before.
Yeah,
any similarity to other events is purely incidental.
I go to your Apex, no worries. Thank you. Thank you, Jake.
And so the Winter War began, generating outrage across Western Europe, which resulted in the bizarre situation of both Germany and the Allies providing military aid to the Finns.
Really?
German helmets, Russian rifles, British planes, French vehicles. It was a wild war.
God damn.
And the reason I'm bringing up the Winter War is precisely because of this military aid package. In order to launch their operation in Scandinavia, which was set to take place on April 5th,
Oh, and don't forget the Polish mailman. Of course, I will never forget. The shit. The beginning of a World War II is a shitty joke. Nazi Germ. The Nazis walking into a bar. Oh, it was great.
the Allies were going to
Return
disguise
to
their
sender,
large-scale deployments in the region as defending the neutrality of the other nations, while securing a dedicated aid corridor to Finland. And on March 13th, 1940, despite the Finns putting up an absolutely heroic resistance, the sheer material superiority of the Soviets forced them to the negotiation table. But the Sisu spirit and their battlefield badassery had achieved the desired result.
Those mailmen were badass, yeah, they were. And the second GIGACHADS counter all of Finland. Yeah, they were incredible.
Stalin desperately wanted to end the war as well. He had lost far more men than he really should have, causing near-fatal damage to an army still reeling from his purges in the 30s.
Yeah, I was about to say, I wonder, why did he had so many losses in the war? Maybe it's because he removed all of his competent people away. Maybe not, who knows?
He had to get out of the war, and that's without taking into account the fact that his intelligence services had gotten wind of Plan R4's impending arrival. Thus, a ceasefire was signed on March 13th, titled
Just
the
remember, we are only at 2 and barely 20 minutes in it, yeah. We just got out of the 25th minute, holy shit.
Peace Treaty, preserving Finland's independence while removing the Allies' political and diplomatic cover. So Plan R4 was officially suspended and the troops sent back to their bases. However, by now, the British had begun observing the Kriegsmarine concentrating in Germany's northern ports. Either they were onto the Admiralty's plans, or preparing for an invasion of their own. In fact, it was both, but that didn't matter. All that mattered was the Allies were back to square one, but they had gone too far in their preparations to do absolutely nothing at all. And so, the First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, got his wish. Operation Wilfred was given the green light. They were going to mine Norway's waters with a naval task force departing Royal Navy anchorage Scapa Flow on April 5th, 1940. It was a truly imposing sight, led by the battle cruiser HMS Renown. But one of the smaller destroyers was lagging behind the formation. They were having issues. HMS Glowworm's crew were having a rough time, since their ship had just come out of dry dock for extensive repairs. They were still just running her in. That same day, Neville Chamberlain made a rousing speech in the House of Commons, stating that the Allies had used the lull in combat to sharpen their defences, eliminate their flaws, and now to go on the offensive, loudly proclaiming that Hitler has missed the bus. He hadn't.
Oh, 7 Glowworm, you're a real one. In the business, we call that foreshadowing. Okay, I am scared a little bit now.
At that same moment, German troops were boarding their ships, final briefings were being held, and all the while, the machinations of war turned. The eve of battle had dawned.
Wait. I cannot read that font. The Kriegsmarine per what? Oh, not this video. I'm remembering back to his Bismarck video. Okay. Oh, I love
The
Sabaton.
task force assigned to take Narvik departed Germany on the 6th of April, with the rest of the fleet moving on the 7th. As is tradition for the early war, though, RAF recon aircraft and local intelligence reported these movements, but they were treated with skepticism from the Admiralty. After all, they had cancelled their invasion of Norway, so why should the Germans invade? It wasn't until April 8th when British diplomatic assets
Kriegsmarine Kerfuffle. Thank you, Jake. Thank you.
in Denmark spotted large movements of German warships passing by the Danish coast that the realization set in. The Germans were en route to Norway.
You're muted.
But by then...
What a great lie, Jake. I can see that I am not muted. Oh, wait. Alright. How could I forget?
Then, it was far too late. The Norwegians wouldn't be able to organize in time, while the Allies were too concerned with their own operations' safety. They assumed that the Germans were after a breakout or seeking battle. After all, they could only see warships, there were no transports or anything, and so naval reinforcements would be dispatched in the form of the Royal Navy's home fleet.
There we go,
And
yeah.
unlike the fictional armada, which bluffed Graf Spee into sinking itself, this one was very, very real. Just look at this order of battle. If the Kriegsmarine got caught by that, they'd stand absolutely no chance. But home fleet would take a couple of days to arrive. Definitely not fast enough to stop the landing. Meanwhile, the mine layers and destroyers of Operation Wilfred were still out there, and the few heavy warships Germany did have were now heading straight towards them. One of those warships being the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, the leading vessel of Task Force 2, with the objective of seizing Trondheim. Ahead of them was the rearguard of Task Force 1, heading at full speed to Narvik. However, they had lost visual contact with the rear destroyer Z-11 von Arnim, as the early morning fog that blankets the North Sea this time of year had well and truly set in. They couldn't see anything. It was that the rhythmic hiss of the hull passing through the ocean was violated by the distant sounds of cannon fire.
What?
Loud, sharp reports in a booming echo across the waves, with small flashes glimmering in the hazy distance. Captain Helmuth Hay immediately brought his Zeiss binoculars up to his eyes, but he couldn't see anything. It was then that a frantic transmission came through from the destroyers.
They were selling to pea soup, as they say in the business. Oh my god.
Ahead, breaking strict radio silence orders to do so. They were coming under attack by an exceptionally aggressive British destroyer. The enemy had already scored hits, and they were closing to torpedo range. The German ships, despite being superior to the enemy on paper, were laid down with troops and supplies for capturing Narvik, not for combat operations, and they were trying to disengage desperately, but to no avail. The British destroyer was hot on their trail and out for the kill. Captain Hay needed no encouragement. He was in one of Germany's newest and best warships. He ordered his men to battle stations and set course directly for the enemy. The Admiral Hipper roared to full speed as its radar scanned the sea ahead. Sure enough, at 9:50 a.m., the small and very, very angry silhouette of HMS Glowworm came into view through the mist. The German destroyers had hidden in a rain squall, using it to get clear and disengage, paving the way for one of history's greatest naval showdowns. Initially, the crew of Admiral Hipper hesitated to engage. In the fog, it was hard to tell who was who, and they didn't want to shoot at their friends. Their dilemma was quickly settled, however, due to the fact that HMS Glowworm, upon seeing the heavy cruiser, instead of doing the sensible things like withdrawing into the fog or signaling a recognition code...
Oh shit, it was this video, crap, never mind. Okay, so apparently I'm going to see why Glowworm was apparently a badass. Okay, I'm interested.
Turned straight at the Germans and started bringing its torpedo launch. Ignition code. Turned straight at the Germans, like withdrawing into the fog or signaling a recognition code. Turned straight at the Germans and started bringing its torpedo launchers online.
Hans, wait.
Turned straight...
And that's her Azurlane model. Oh, she looks so cute. How adorable.
At the Germans and started bringing its torpedo launchers
Hans, have a look at this Scheiße.
Online.
Fritz, Japan aren't our allies yet. Fire!
Captain Hay, though shocked and looking on in disbelief, was not rattled, and immediately ordered his ship to open fire.
Oh shit.
The heavy cruiser's guns roared into life, their first salvo sending geysers rising into the air.
Oh,
Glowworm pushed through the spray and surged forward, torpedoes loaded and ready.
Damn.
As she closed the distance, the secondary batteries on Admiral Hipper prepared to engage, but they would be left redundant.
Look up Hopper and Bismarck. Hipper. Okay, I will look that in a minute.
As the fire control for the main guns had found the range. German 8-inch shells began tearing through the little destroyer, annihilating the bridge and the radio room while disabling the forward armament.
Oh god.
But Captain Roop aboard Glowworm, miraculously still alive, was undeterred. He fired the torpedoes and ordered the engine room to make smoke. While Hipper was busy either dodging or sinking, they would make a break for the fog or a rain squall, whichever they could find first, and then they would break contact towards HMS Renown.
Okay.
Unfortunately, while their attack had been both brave and well executed, the German captain had held his nerve. Admiral Hipper, throughout the entire engagement, had been carefully maneuvering to ensure that the bow was always pointing at Glowworm, ensuring that should torpedoes be fired at them, their effectiveness would be minimized, if not evaded entirely.
Oh fuck.
The heavy cruiser maintained course, dodging and weaving between the British torpedoes, eventually ploughing through the smokescreen, the secondary guns blazing away as she went. Only to be met with an unthinkable sight.
What?
Glowworm had not...
This is the glowworm over here? Holy shit. If I was a German captain of a ship and I was seeing this just ship rider, like a ghost shipper, let's just name her that. This baby is scary as hell. I would just, if I was the captain, I would just say, nope, never in hell. No. Withdraw. This is a main character right here.
Not turn to run like everyone assumed. Oh, no. Captain Roop, after making smoke, realized that he had actually closed the range, and that while Hipper was evading, he could probably get his other set of torpedoes off as well.
Huh?
With decisive helm instructions, he ordered the ship to come about for another attack, aligning his remaining torpedo
Captain Rope, nah, I'd win.
battery towards the Germans' last position,
The third GIGACHADS
only for the Germans to unexpectedly come to him. And so here he was, an enemy heavy cruiser emerging through his own smokescreen inside his torpedo's arming distance. Close enough he could probably fire his service revolver at them. His guns could hurt Hipper at this range, and most of them were still functional. In fact, he could probably get inside their main battery's range if he closed even closer. But the secondaries would tear him apart if he went broadside. In that case, there was only one thing for it. The German officers on Admiral Hipper's bridge stared in complete disbelief as the smokestack on HMS Glowworm began spewing wildly as its bow began to swing to starboard, straight at them.
Flying speed!
Holy shit!
HMS Glowworm's bow was sheared clean off in the impact, as the jagged remains of her hull
Holy crap!
gouged multiple holes in Hipper's side, wrecking her forward torpedo launchers in the process, while knocking one of her crew overboard.
If I'm going to hell, I'm taking you with me. Love me some laser pig. Okay, makes sense.
The damage done was severe, resulting in 500 tons of water flooding multiple compartments. However, it was brought under control relatively quickly. Glowworm, meanwhile, was set afire and sinking fast. The order to abandon ship had been given once the destroyer had broken free of Hipper's hull, but the damaged vessel sank too quickly for most of her crew to escape. The icy-cold waters of the North Sea flowed through the broken bow as her superstructure burned. The superheated boilers, shocked by the change in temperature, exploded with a deafening roar, taking 109 Royal Navy sailors to their deaths. The Germans, while searching for their lost man, immediately began rescue operations, pulling survivors from the water, Captain Roop being among them. But as he tried to climb aboard Admiral Hipper in the rough seas, he lost his grip on the rope and fell into the ship's wake, tragically drowning as a result. After the rescue operation was complete, Captain Hay ordered the British survivors be brought inside and warmed up as quickly as possible. He wanted to meet the men who had fought so bravely and tenaciously. Upon speaking to the prisoners, he asked after the most senior
And mad props to the German commander here, really?
officer who relayed the fate of Captain Roop. He told the British sailors that their captain was a very brave man, and he meant it very sincerely, because after Admiral Hipper returned to Germany for repairs, Captain Hay filed his POW report, which always included a roll call of the prisoners' names and service numbers. This was then provided to the International Red Cross, who would inform the relevant government of their serviceman's fate.
Damn.
When Captain Hay filed the report to the Red Cross, he enclosed a letter addressed to the British Admiralty. That letter was nothing less than a medal citation. A citation from a
decorating an enemy. Mad props to the German commander here, like, absolute respect to this mad lad.
German officer, an enemy combatant, describing the encounter with Glowworm and recommending Captain Roop be posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions. And sure enough, the Royal Navy agreed, awarding Lieutenant Commander Gerard Broadmead Roop, captain of HMS Glowworm, the Victoria Cross for great valour above the call of duty in successfully engaging a superior force and fighting to the very end against overwhelming odds.
Damn.
But while First Blood had gone to the Kriegsmarine...
Okay, I will be back in a minute. I need to go to the personal patron. Be back in a minute. Holy shit. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Sure. Now that's how a commander should act. Definitely, without a doubt. Even if it's an enemy commander, absolute respect to him.
It would be none other than the...
Okay.
But while First Blood had gone to the Kriegsmarine, it would be none other than the crew of the mighty submarine Orzel from the great nation of Poland who would even the scoreboard. The Polish submarine Orzel has a fantastic history.
Really?
So much so that after reading a quick biography of the ship while researching this video, I made a deep dive video on it. Get it? Deep dive? Because it's a submarine? Come on, I'm hilarious.
Yeah, a great joke.
Essentially, though, the short version of that story is they escaped Poland during the German invasion, attempted to sink a battleship, got attacked by German escorts, fled to Estonia, got interned as neutrality violators, only to, by definition, commit an act of piracy, steal their boat back, engage in a running firefight with Estonian soldiers while doing it, and then snuck through the Baltic Sea past both the German and Soviet navies to Scotland, where they joined the Royal Navy.
What? Yeah, the world's greatest escape, yeah. Orzel's crew, Polska Kurom.
Then they've
That's
been
one
refitted
hell of a story.
and are now patrolling the south of the North Sea. Try saying that while intoxicated. But after things had started going down in Scandinavia, they had moved into the mouth of the Skagerrak to have a look around. What they found was the German cargo vessel SS Rio de Janeiro, steadily making her way along the
Not to be confused with the greatest jailbreaker. Yeah, true.
Norwegian coastline near Kristiansand. The unfortunate freighter carried the reinforcements for the assault on Bergen, scheduled to begin the next day. It would never get there. The ORP Orgel surfaced in front of the German vessel and signalled it to stop. Once this was done, the ship was ordered to surrender or be sunk in accordance with cruiser rules. The Rio de Janeiro did not respond. Naturally, they couldn't surrender with an invasion force on board, but nor could they really run away. They're in an overloaded freighter. However, as the Germans would steadily discover throughout the course of the entire war, the Polish have a distinct deficiency of chill. Nor do they have a lot of patience.
Yeah, as an HLC viewer, yeah, I can confirm that.
Or sympathy for invaders. The silence from the freighter was considered a refusal of terms, and so torpedoes were promptly dispatched their way,
Damn.
the second volley of which detonating the ammunition stored aboard in a massive explosion, clearly heard by Norwegian villagers on shore. The Polish submarine transmitted a contact report to the Admiralty, only to follow it with a message marked as critical. As while they observed the sinking, they witnessed large numbers of personnel in what appeared to be army uniforms abandoning ship. It appeared that the jig was indeed up. Yet astonishingly, after fishing them out of the water and interrogating them, the Norwegians,
The Polish are now and forever European Texas. Yeah.
despite having caught the Germans red-handed and observing the naval movements taking place, didn't put their military on high readiness. They simply ordered all their units to stand by. Thankfully, their frontline troops showed far more initiative. As midnight ticked over and the next day began...
By the way, I was thinking, in the case of Israel, I know it would sound ridiculous, but if Poland is European Texas, what would Israel be? A Middle Eastern, I don't know, Virginia? Maybe, definitely not Florida, but maybe, who knows, Nevada? I don't know. Idaho, maybe. Like, what would, if Israel was an American state, like, what is To what US state Israel is most similar to? Like, I don't know. We will think about it in another day.
And a menacing shape advanced through the midnight darkness of Oslo Fjord.
Oh god.
Battle Group 5 en route to the Norwegian
Either Louisiana or Virginia. Wait, Louisiana. Isn't in HLC lore Louisiana is the one who is who's talking like very funny? Or wait, no, Oklahoma he's talking normally. Louisiana is the one that's talking funny, right? And Virginia, I never heard HLC Virginia, by the way. Huh. Did HLC ever had an introduction to Virginia? It would be funny to hear.
capital was led by the heavy cruiser Blucher, sister
Would you rather be Florida or Alabama? Honestly, I would rather be Florida because first of all, if you want a Middle Eastern Alabama, look at Pakistan. Yeah, I would rather be Florida in that case. We may be a shithole, but them we are indestructible.
The ship of Admiral Hipper, being followed closely by the pocket battleship Lutzow. They had advanced relatively far unchallenged, but their luck was about to run out. The Norwegian patrol boat, Pole 3, was a requisitioned whaling boat, armed with a 76mm cannon.
Then Virginia or Louisiana it is. Yeah.
And assorted small arms for the crew. A crew numbering maybe 10 to 15 men, mostly conscripts, and a hull displacement of just 214 tons. Commanded by Captain Leif Welding Olsen. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong photograph.
What?
Here we go. Captain Olsen and his crew of rather cold Vikings were, funnily enough,
You all ain't redneck enough for Idaho. True enough.
for a patrol boat, patrolling the Oslo Fjord, when all of a sudden, the dark shape of a warship emerged from the gloom, joined by several more of worryingly ever-increasing size. The warship in question was the German destroyer escort Albatross, following
shit.
Blucher down the fjord. Upon sighting the ship, Captain Olsen immediately changed course towards it, signaling an order to leave Norwegian waters immediately. When it became evident they wouldn't leave, he increased speed and fired a warning shot, stating that if they do not withdraw, he would make them. The Germans didn't respond for several minutes in sheer disbelief. Was this guy serious? He's in
Very.
a barge. He's in a whaling tug. Like, look at him. He's tiny. Eventually, though, Albatross's captain, Siegfried Strelo, countered this threat with an obvious demand of his own. Surrender.
Ha,
But-
bad idea.
Unlike the Germans, it didn't take even a moment for Captain Olsen to reply. Less than a minute after the German ship had sent their demand, flares shot up from the Norwegian vessel.
Oh.
2 red and 1 white. The signal for enemy attack. Accompanied by a radio transmission warning naval headquarters and the capital's coastal fortifications that Norway was under attack. With this done, there was only one thing left to do. And for the second time within 24 hours, German sailors watched on in complete amazement as a ship less than a tenth of their tonnage made smoke and headed straight at them. Albatross's
Captain Olsen, parry this, you filthy casual.
captain, realizing the vessel was armed,
Second
ordered his
one.
AA guns to fire, but it was already too late. Pole 3 slammed into the side of her prey at full speed, breaching the hull. But as a quick piece of mental arithmetic should tell you, a converted whaler is not a destroyer. Albatross shook off the attack and tore the belligerent boat to shreds,
Oh shit.
forcing the crew to abandon ship. Sadly, Captain Olsen was fatally wounded in the exchange and passed out from blood loss while abandoning ship, leading to his drowning. He would be
Shame.
the first Norwegian casualty
I love these mini descriptions of each entry. Yeah, me too.
of the Second World War. But his sacrifice was far from in vain. As the flares soared into the night sky, the coastal batteries came online all throughout the fjord, who began engaging the German ships through the fog. And it's here our second and third Norwegian GIGACHADS step into the ring. That's 3 within as many paragraphs. A testament to the tens of thousands of Norwegians who took up arms against fascism. And they were going to open their account with the Nazis in truly epic style. At 4 a.m. on April 9th, 1940, Colonel Birger Eriksen was observing the heavy cruiser Blucher getting ever closer to his position at Oscarsborg Fortress. He had been alerted by Pole 3's heroics at the mouth of the fjord, and brought what few men he had to battle stations. They were an eclectic band of National Service conscripts and aging reservists, with their numbers augmented by everything from the admin staff to the cooks from the kitchen. And this band of untrained coastal gunners were manning 40-year-old equipment no one really expected to need in open-topped fortifications. The force facing them down, meanwhile, was comprised of some of the world's most modern warships, full of elite assault troops, with the sole goal of seizing their capital, along with the Norwegian royal family. The only advantage the Norwegians had is that Blucher's crew was just as shiny and new as their ship. Even so, as the Germans closed the range, it seemed as though they would succeed in their mission. But Birger Eriksen had other ideas. After gauging the range, he ordered his gunners to enter a firing solution. He had taken extra care in doing this step, because given the lack of trained personnel, once his 2 11-inch guns had been fired, he wouldn't be able to reload them. As the barrels locked into position, he checked his watch, reconfirmed his solution, took a deep breath, and gave the order to fire on Blucher. But the guns did not fire.
What?
They remained silent. His gun crews were looking at him with anxiety. The standing orders were clear. Warning shots were to be fired, followed by positive identification of who they were shooting at. His second-in-command reminded him that they would be violating this very strict protocol, and that they could end up firing on Royal Navy ships by mistake.
For God's
This
sake.
would create an even bigger international incident than one they were already seemingly starting. Eriksen cut him off mid-sentence with a retort that has since gone down in Norwegian legend. Either I'll be decorated or court-martialed. Now fire! The first blast shattered the early morning.
I will either go into jail or be honored as a hero. But either way, fire. To be fair, valid concern. Yeah, valid. Just valid. Colonel Eriksen, take Oslo. You can't afford it.
Morning calm as the 11-inch shell left its barrel and slammed into Blucher's mainmast. This knocked out the ship's radar and radio communications, while sending shrapnel raining down on the deck. The real damage, though, came from the second shot.
But the GIGACHAD energy prevails. Yeah, it does.
Which scored a direct hit on the munitions magazine for the Arado 196 float planes, which included an entire complement of depth charges.
Damn.
The explosion was catastrophic, setting the entire superstructure ablaze while blowing a hole in the side of the ship, rupturing bulkheads and sending several tons of burning oil spewing into the fjord, choking the crews in the engineering section with acrid black smoke in the process. Worse still, the explosion completely obliterated the electrical system for the main armament, meaning Blucher was unable to return fire. That said, it didn't stop Blucher's AA gunners and the soldiers aboard from making the attempt. 20mm cannon and 7.92 machine gun rounds started flying at the Norwegians, who, rather sensibly, given they were now unarmed, fell back into their fortifications. However, their comrades in the smaller batteries on the other side of the fjord could reload their guns, and before the shell-shocked Germans could even get themselves organized, a veritable hailstorm of 57mm shells started tearing the Blucher's superstructure to pieces, while heavier 6-inch guns firing at close range targeted the steering and propulsion section. It was absolute chaos on board the heavy cruiser, as a raging inferno had begun storming through the ship, compartment by compartment. The fire suppression system had been knocked out by the shelling. The untrained crew were descending into panic. The soldiers on board were already donning their life jackets and sprinting to get above deck. Yet Captain Oskar Kumetz kept his cool.
Mhm. Хорошо. Okay, that was my dad right now. He is out to go and have a good time in the city. Okay,
The
back to the
situation
video.
was dire, yes, but they had managed to keep their engines running, and while they'd lost their rudder, with alternate propulsion, they could control the ship enough to navigate the field. Pumps were keeping the water out for now, and they were getting outside the firing arc of the Norwegian guns. Lutzow, the pocket battleship behind them, could suppress the enemy with their full-size armament, so the mission, while off to a bad start, was still possible. Until
Okay.
the arrival of our third Norwegian gigachad.
Oh god.
Commander Senior
yes.
Grade Andreas Andersen.
Anderson! Hey, DD Apex is entitled to some fun in the city. Yeah, he is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially it's Friday. Apex lol. I'm already used to it. Yeah, especially since today's Friday, it's fun time all night. Sleep can wait for Saturday. Couldn't find an actual photograph, so we are using a GIGACHAD image. You know, it's fitting, to be honest. Okay.
He lived in the town of Drobak near the fortress, and he knew every inch of both the batteries and the field. He had been the commander of the base's torpedo launchers from their installation before World War I until his retirement in 1927. However, since the tensions in Europe had broken out into war, he had put himself on active reserve. That night, as the alarm was sounded, Anderson was at home getting through the last stage of a nasty case of influenza. It was then his phone rang. Colonel Eriksson told him about the approaching armada and requested he come out of retirement and man the torpedoes. He didn't even need to ask. It only took the phone to ring before Commander Anderson started pulling his old uniform jacket on.
Nice.
The old man was back, and he was going to kick some ass. Having hopped aboard a fishing boat across the water to his position...
A fishing boat? Okay, Norwegian fishing boat escaped to Canada after the invasion. Ah, this one. They crossed the Atlantic in it. Holy shit.
Anderson was now staring down the sights of his torpedo battery, looking straight at the furiously burning heavy cruiser. He was cool, but concerned. The weapons he had on hand were none other than old Whitehead torpedoes,
What?
built by, of all places, Austria-Hungary, a country that no longer existed, half of whose
Damn.
descendants were now sailing down his fjord to take his city.
God damn.
There is a touch of delicious irony in a retiree pensioner using the weapons of his youth against one of the world's newest warships. But a retiree though
the
he
irony,
be,
yeah.
obsolete he most certainly was not. With
Oh,
the
he
experience
was
of
not
nearly
obsolete.
half a century, he lined up his shot and fired a torpedo directly at Blücher. Incredibly, the ancient weapon worked perfectly and headed straight to the target, impacting just under the forward turret on the armor belt. He'd misjudged the speed slightly, thinking she still had enough power to move. Shifting his aim slightly, he fired the second, which struck Blücher directly amidships, right underneath the raging inferno.
Commander Anderson, I'm too old for this shit, so you better die so I could get back to bed quickly.
Consuming the upper deck. The bulkheads holding the hull together buckled and gave way, sending an icy Nordic torrent pouring into the machinery spaces as oil came pouring out. The engine stopped dead as the ship lurched over, and just like that, the second ship of the Admiral Hipper class had met its fate. The mighty warship
Holy
Blücher
shit.
was doomed. With no firefighting system,
I'm too old for this shit. I want my crackers and a nap, so you better die right now, or you will die yesterday. Captain Anderson in a nutshell.
systems or engine power for the pumps, the flames advanced at will with nothing to stop them, right up until it hit the munition storage for the anti-aircraft guns. A secondary explosion nearly split the ship in two, killing hundreds of men trying to abandon ship, while rupturing the fuel bunkers, spewing yet more slimy oil into the field. Their flagship gone, assuming their commander dead, the pocket battleship Lutzow ordered the retreat, firing its guns to cover their escape. But the Norwegians would, of course, have the last word. Seeing the Germans turn tail, The shore batteries shifted their fire to Lutzow, causing serious damage to the superstructure and knocking out their forward main turret.
Nice.
The survivors of Blucher who made it ashore were immediately taken prisoner and put under light guard. There was no reason to corral or interrogate a group of freezing, unarmed men. All in all, between 700 to 900 German personnel were killed or wounded, with a further 1,000 or so taken prisoner, all while successfully defending the capital Oslo. And what were the total Norwegian losses?
0, right?
0. Except for Captain Olsen at the initiation of hostilities, not a single Norwegian serviceman was lost. Captain Eriksson was indeed proven correct. He would be decorated, with Norway's highest award for gallantry. Operation Weserübung's main objective, and the Kriegsmarine's grand prize, had met with complete disaster. And so the capture of Oslo would fall to the initiative of Germany's youngest and most daring branch. It was time to send in the Luftwaffe.
Oh my god. Der battle. Luftwaffe. I can read this one this time. Luftwaffe. Yeah, it was. Wait, it's an M or wait, that's a W. That's a W. Okay. Luftwaffe Lunacy. That's a daring name for a chapter. And we only in half of the video. Holy shit.
Just like the Kriegsmarine, things...
Wait, what?
Or at least it was supposed to be. Just like the Kriegsmarine, things had started well, but as the old saying goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And despite what people think, the main enemy of an airman isn't the opposing force, it's the environment. Be it gravity, or in this case, the weather.
Right, it's Northern Europe. It is freezing balls over there. And the German planes were not designed for that. I think. I told you this video was insane. Yeah, very insane. So insane, I need to go to pee again. I'll be back in a minute. Good. Now back to the video. I told you this video was insane. Lol, if you think this one is nuts, go to his channel, look for the thumbnail. Don't touch our boats. I can assume what is that one about. I have an assumption. Oh my god. Oh, it goes very well so far. Okay.
The panzer unit involved, along with a detachment of paratroopers, had, with the aid of a shower force from a bomber wing, convinced King Christian of Denmark to capitulate with minimal resistance. The entire country of Denmark fell within hours, to the extent that Luftwaffe...
just a hunch about that one. A hunch. An absolute hunch, yeah.
Aircraft landed in various Danish airports to accept surrenders, including the city of Aalborg, which surrendered to Oberleutnant Victor Mulders, brother of Werner Mulders, head of Luftwaffe fighters. However, King Christian's younger brother, King Haakon of Norway, would not be so malleable to German threats. Though in fairness, King Christian didn't have two neutral countries and an ocean to get in the way of said.
GIGACHADS Country 9, King Christian X, the 10th, stayed behind in Denmark, riding his horse daily among his people, urging them to resist the Nazis. Not bad, cause that's my next React recommendation. Okay.
Panzers. The rest of the Luftwaffe had taken off from northern Germany, bound for Norway. But the same morning fog that had caused issues for the Navy had now turned into a thick cloud bank and rain squalls all over the place. There wasn't a way around the weather, and given their ordnance loads, climbing over it wasn't an option either. Not to mention the paratroopers were in unpressurized cabins on transports, along with a full-scale airlift coming in behind them, and those guys didn't even have parachutes. There was only one thing for it. They'd have to fly straight on through the weather and hope for the best. What came next was an absolute disaster. The lead flight of Ju-52s made it through the weather, heading for Sola at Stavanger. Capturing this airfield was vital to shut down the Norwegian Air Force and begin the airlift. Unfortunately, when they had formed up, one of their aircraft was missing, as was their fighter escort. The formation started to circle for stragglers, picking up whatever aircraft they could find. A squadron of Ju-88 high-speed medium bombers thundered past them. Their mission was to take out the airfield defenses ahead of the landing, so at least that was still on schedule, though they too looked short of aircraft. It was then a pair of BF-110s formed up on their wing, the pilots looking confused. A whole squadron was supposed to escort them, yet they were the only fighters to arrive. Well,
Really?
the bombers had gone ahead, so Hauptmann Capito, the leader of the transports, gave the order for mission start. They just had to hope that they still had surprise. If they didn't take the airfield, the BF-110 pilots would have to bail out over Norway with nowhere to land. However, it should be stated that Gordon Gollop, who was leading the BF-110 squadron detailed for their escort, had abandoned the mission and diverted to Denmark after two of his flight collided, killing both crews. And situations like this happened across all the major airborne drops planned for southern Norway. Aircraft were scattered, formations broke apart, some abandoned the mission while others continued on. It was an absolute madhouse in the skies above the Skagerrak, causing the pilots to break radio silence and call out to one another for a navigation fix. And watching all this chaos unfold was General Hans Giesler. The commander of Fliegerkorps 10 was watching the situation develop with mounting horror. His men were in disarray and the element of surprise was almost certainly lost. If the operation couldn't be brought back under control, he would have to abort the entire operation, and if he waited too long, he wouldn't even be able to do that. General Giesler ordered a full recall. Mission abort. They would have to take Norway the old-fashioned way. But by then, it was too late. All he ended up doing was throwing the disorganized air fleet into complete confusion. The Luftwaffe, despite being the most modern air force in the world at the time, had inherited the nightmarish bureaucracy and the ego-driven turf wars of its founding government. The arms didn't know what the legs were doing, and God forbid they even speak to the head, which doesn't have a clue about any of it. And while it was good for the time and Germany was a leading proponent of radio communication, 1940s radio technology was far from the high-powered digital satellite wizardry we know today. Even with a really beefy transmitter, atmospherics could play hell with it. Atmospherics, like now. And so, when the recall order was given, a third of the aircraft heard it, another third heard a garbled mess and had to guess, while the final third was on the wrong frequency and heard nothing at all. The end result being perhaps the only recorded instance of a still airborne set of LGOPs, little groups of paratroopers. And so ad hoc formations of BF-110s and Ju-52 transports joined up and headed to their objectives with little to no backup at all. To them, the mission was still very much a go. Soon the Norwegian coastline hoved into view. As Hauptmann Capito's flight approached Sola Stavanger, he saw the Ju-88s at work. The BF-110s, having collected another flight of stragglers, gave a hand wave to the transports and dived for the airfield. They started strafing soft targets while the Ju-88s hit the defenses. Oberleutnant von Brandis, in command of the Fallschirmjägers, had at his disposal 135 lightly armed men to take the airfield, and he had to hold it long enough for his backup to arrive, if it even arrived. And as the last Ju-88 dropped its bombs, 11 transports in perfect formation swept over the field, and for the first time in our history, it was about to start raining men. The Germans jumped low, right over the field. However, they had jumped...
Oh my god, this song came out in my head. It's raining men, hallelujah, it's raining men, oh yeah. Fucking hell, why did it came to my head? And also, I also remember the Russian version of that, which is even more terrible.
Into a disaster. Without the full wing of fighters to aid them, and the Ju-88s having already dropped their bombs, the defences were still active. AA fire flew up to meet them, along with a fusillade of small arms fire. But the guns, having rarely been used and hastily set up, overheated or jammed, allowing the Germans to reach the ground relatively unscathed. Frantically trying to service the weapons and get them back into operation, the Norwegian troops realized that a full-scale invasion was underway. Their weapons were non-functional, and special forces, supported by aircraft, had landed right on top of them. Panic started to spread. Preparations were made to retreat and withdraw. It was then our fourth Norwegian GIGACHAD cleared his machine gun, aligned his sights, and aimed at the main enemy landing zone, which just so happened to be in front of his bunker. Private Gallus Johansson grabbed the spade grip of his machine gun and depressed the trigger with venom, dropping several of the Fallschirmjägers before they even hit the ground. He then started raking the assembly area with fire, suppressing von Brandis's command element along with most of the force. The German method of airborne deployment relied on their heavier weapons being dropped in canisters, while the infantry dropped with grenades and pistols. This kept them light, mobile, and easier to stick the landing. The problem, of course, is the heavy-duty gear like machine guns, rifles, anti-tank weapons, all of that are dropped separately from their operators. And those canisters just so happen to be in the middle of an open, flat airfield in front of a machine gun. Sources on both sides vary widely and often conflict, but at least 10 enemy combatants were taken out of commission by Private Johansson alone, with some estimates saying he wounded at least 20 more.
Private Johansson, happiness is a belt-fed weapon. True.
Inevitably, however, it didn't take long for the Germans to get organized. Several fire teams armed with grenades flanked his firing position and fragged it, while the rest of the unit retrieved their weapons and fanned out to secure the airfield, which they subsequently did, taking the rest of the garrison prisoner while paving the way for the mass airlift of troops following them in. Thankfully, though, Johansson was only wounded in this action. Eventually, he was taken prisoner after the door to his bunker was blown in with explosives. Until he and his weapon were taken out of commission, he manned his post, and he manned it well. A true hero of Norway. Nevertheless, the Germans had their foothold on the southwestern coast, and despite the chaos of the initial stages, their assault on Sola had been relatively textbook. The assault on Oslo, though, was a different story. Lieutenant Hansen, a flight leader in Zerstörer 76, flying their Bf-110s, had cobbled together some stragglers after the calamitous start to the mission. They had broken through a horrifically bad cloud front en route to Oslo-Fornebu Airport, only to be met head-on by 6 more Norwegian GIGACHADS.
6?
Brathen, Dag Kron, Christian Schei, Finn Thorsager, Rolf Treden, and Per Wale. The Germans had run into none other than the one and literally only Norwegian fighter squadron, flying their Gloucester Gladiators.
Shit.
That's right. This band of Norwegian fighter pilots were facing down the world's best air force, equipped with nothing but obsolete British biplanes. Yet these absolute legends were undeterred. Their home was under attack, and they were going to defend it. They had been hard at work all morning, in fact, patrolling over the nearby fjords. They had seen the smoking wreck of the Blücher below them and eyed it with satisfaction. It was now, however, that they saw something even more satisfying. A large formation of enemy transport aircraft and not a single Bf-109 in sight. Diving in on the Ju-50...
Never tell us the odds. This entire video is about never telling us the odds.
It would be Rolf Treden who drew first blood, sending one of the transports down in flames, smoke billowing from its starboard engine as it spun into the ground. The Germans were paralyzed. The sudden and unexpected attack sent the escorting Bf-110s reeling as they scattered to escape the new threat. However, Lieutenant Erhard Kort had not acted fast enough. Before he could dive away and use the superior speed of his Messerschmitt, Dag Kron had flashed onto his tail, opening fire at very close range. He didn't stand a chance. The Bf-110 lurched over into a steep dive, its crew obviously killed outright by the Norwegians' attack, slamming into the ground on the Nesodden.
Notice we are at 16 GIGACHADS right now. Yeah, I noticed it already. We went from 10 up to 16 immediately.
Peninsula south of Oslo. The other gladiators split off and attacked the myriad of Luftwaffe aircraft filling the sky around them. HE-111s and Do-17s, on their way to hit targets inland, had been caught up in the air battle and were now subject to ferocious attack. Per Wale, having spotted the bombers, picked out an HE-111 and emptied his guns into it, sending the Heinkel spinning down right next to his home airfield at Fornebu. Dag Kron got his second kill, hitting the same formation, blasting the first HE-111's wingman. By now, though, the Bf-110s had gotten organized and rejoined the engagement, all guns blazing. Christian Schei and his gladiator charged into the German fighters, spraying his guns at everything that moved. He'd done the same to the transports before, wounding a number of the troops inside. But his luck was about to run out. Helmut Lent, a Luftwaffe pilot who would eventually become a 100-kill ace and the de facto leader of Germany's night fighter force, had singled out this overly aggressive gladiator for destruction. Lining up the shot, Lent opened fire at close range, riddling Schei's air.
Wait, I know this is an I-15Bs. Yeah, Bs, but you try find it gun camera alpha pipeline kill. Fair.
Craft as well as his left shoulder. With his flight controls damaged and throttle unresponsive, the Norwegian aviator lined his gladiator up to land in a nearby field. There was a tense moment when his undercarriage snagged a high-voltage cable, but by a miracle it gave way while slowing him down. The biplane skidded across the ground, churning the earth, eventually grinding to a halt, tilting up on its nose. Against the odds, he'd made it down safely. Extricating himself with difficulty and with the help of the locals, he was quickly taken to a hospital in Sandvika, west of Oslo.
Phew.
With the Germans now organised and ever so slightly furious at being bullied by Norwegians in biplanes, the surviving gladiators promptly decided that it was time to leave, beating a hasty retreat to their divert fields. All except Per Wale, who, wanting to rearm as fast as possible and get back in the fight, chose to land at Fornebu, the Germans' primary target. As he taxied towards the hangars, frantic gestures from the ground crew as well as the loud reports of anti-aircraft fire warned him of the oncoming danger. Quickly turning his engine off, he unbuckled his straps and dove out of the aircraft, sprinting for a nearby slit trench. This would end up saving his life, as not a minute later, ZG-76 swept over the airfield, blasting every remaining aircraft on it. The two spare gladiators, Tiger Moth trainers, a civilian transport, every aircraft on the field went up in flames on the first pass. The 110s made run after run against the airfield's defences, who frantically fired back at the offending Germans. However, being members of the capital city's garrison, who had sunk a heavy warship that morning, their morale and resolve was made of much sterner stuff, and they soon started inflicting damage on their attackers. One of Lieutenant Hansen's engines took a direct hit, spewing coolant everywhere, while another 110 was torn to shreds, leaking fuel literally all over the place, which was a huge issue as due to the bad weather, the unexpected dogfight, and the heavy resistance, most of the fighters had their red fuel warning lights on. They had to land. However, it appeared that they had achieved their objective. The enemy was distracted, their defenses halved, the enemy aircraft either destroyed or forced away, and at that moment a full wing of Ju-52s arrived overhead, ready to disgorge their paratroopers and take the airfield. Only they didn't.
What?
They started forming up into a line astern formation, with the lead transport dropping his flaps and cutting his throttles.
What?
Oh shit.
What?
In the chaos of the morning, the paratrooper force had received the recall and withdraw order, meaning they'd aborted their drop. But the airlift component had either not received it or, as the evidence suggests, ignored the command as an enemy ruse. Whatever the cause, an entire wing of transport aircraft were about to land on an enemy airfield, currently manned by an entire garrison armed with anti-aircraft artillery and machine guns. Lieutenant Hansen had to think fast. He and his wingmen were out of ammo, as was Helmut Lent. Their fuel was low, and the lead transport was even now starting to touch down. He had no radio communications with the airlift forces, so he couldn't warn them off, and he didn't even have a flare signal or anything for that either. Then, it happened. The Norwegians unloaded on the landing Ju-52, tearing it to pieces along with the men inside, including Hauptmann Wagner. The other transports, seeing it happen, waved off immediately under heavy fire. However, the second in line was already on final, and he couldn't abort his landing. Lieutenant Hansen made a split-second decision, a decision which earns both he and Helmut Lent their own GIGACHAD award.
What?
They couldn't let their comrades get slaughtered. They had no fuel to divert to friendly territory, and without the paratroopers coming, there was no way to prevent the entire invasion from falling apart, especially after the Kriegsmarine got decimated.
What do you mean? They've only lost one ship so far.
Oh, right.
Right.
We haven't got there yet. Simply put, the situation was dire. Their mission was practically a bust. Except Lieutenant Hansen and the men of ZG-76 decided, no, if the paratroopers aren't coming, I guess we'll just have to do it ourselves. The pilot of the second Ju-52 suddenly noticed all the Norwegians start to panic and shift their fire to his left. He then nearly had a heart attack as skidding across the airfield in front of him, literally missing his nose by inches, was none other than Helmut Lentz Bf-110. After skidding off the end of the runway and knocking over a farmer's fence, the rest of the Messerschmitts started emptying their remaining ammo into the Norwegians before following suit and crash landing on the airfield. Once this was done, they got out, grabbed their rear-mounted machine guns as well as their pistols, pulled them out of the aircraft, and assaulted the airfield themselves. That's
Holy
right.
shit. If you want something done right, you will do that yourself. Okay. Okay. Got to respect the effort. They deserved the GIGACHADS award. Okay.
These Luftwaffe pilots crash-landed their aircraft, pulled the guns off the back, and stormed the airfield themselves.
Damn.
The Oslo garrison, upon seeing this take place, quickly decided that given that they were low on ammo and the enemy was willing to pull this level of bullshit, it was time to fall back and regroup. The Norwegians withdrew from the airfield and headed north, leaving their heavy equipment and the capital city behind. But they had done their duty, and they'd done it well. They had bought time for their royal family and King Haakon VII to escape, along with the government. But they weren't out of the woods yet. As the Ju-52 started unloading their troops, frantic radio calls were made to Fliegerkorps 10's headquarters, telling them that the field had been taken and reinforcements were required immediately. But the Luftwaffe air attaché to Norway, Hauptmann Eberhard Spiller, was not going to wait around and let the country's most valuable hostages get away. He had
Yeah, at that level of bullshit, it's most definitely time to leave. Yeah.
had raced to the airfield with all possible speed after he had heard that the invasion had started, and even as the first transport unloaded its troops, he ran to meet them. After assembling the first wave of the landing forces, which included a small unit of Fallschirmjägers, a group of Luftwaffe field troops, and even a Wehrmacht marching band, he marched into Oslo to officially declare Germany's special military operation in Norway to defend its neutrality from the Western Allies, who so horribly violated it during the Altmark incident. Of course, no one would buy this nonsense.
Yeah.
Even with Vidkun Quisling proclaiming his independent pro-Nazi government, everyone would rightfully see this as an invasion.
Yeah.
But if they could get the king to sign off on it, as they had with Denmark, it would give them political and
Oh, welcome back, Dark. It's been a while.
international legitimacy.
Had
Problem
about-
is, they need the king for that.
Damn.
And he is never going to do that voluntarily. So, after their little parade, Hauptmann Spiller assembled the small group of Fallschirmjägers that had shown up, tactically acquired an assortment
And your mother was sick. Oh, yeah. I can see that.
of civilian vehicles, including several buses, as
You were AFK for a while. Okay, good.
well as an assortment of cars, and then charged after the fleeing Norwegian government, eventually catching up to them just after midnight near the town of Elverum. But they would advance no further, as a roadblock had been set up by the withdrawing Norwegian forces that clogged the road completely for at least 100 meters or more. The German troops, having failed in clearing the obstacles with their vehicles, dismounted and advanced past the blockade towards a small farming hamlet named Midtskogen. It was then the leader of the Fallschirmjägers got suspicious. With tree lines on their flanks, buildings to their front, and a roadblock forcing them to halt, this had trap or ambush written all over it. He ordered the mortar section with them to fire illumination rounds over the hamlet. Hauptmann Spiller protested at the delay, but there was no sense in taking unnecessary risks. The flares lit up
I didn't know that the stream turned into a World War II history lesson. Interesting. Yeah, we are here already for a while. We're here for almost 2 hours. We still have a few more videos to watch. But don't worry. Over half an hour, but it is very interesting. And my god, it's good.
up the snow-covered ground around the farm buildings, revealing our 11th Norwegian GIGACHAD,
Oh god.
Captain of the King's Guard, Olaf Helseth, who immediately ordered his men to open fire. At the initiation of combat, the Germans immediately went into action. MG-34s started laying down a base of fire.
Props to that commander again, looking out for his men. This one that we are reacting to right now.
Who immediately ordered his men to open fire. At the initiation of combat, the Germans immediately went into action. MG-34s started laying down a base of fire as the paratroopers advanced. However, they had not just walked into any ambush, they had just walked into a complex ambush. A Norwegian machine gun opened up on their flank, killing 2 or 3 men in the first...
Also bad dark. Just type out everything, not also and then type half an hour, okay? Please. Generation 0 is based on Norway. Okay.
First, while pinning the attackers in place. This was followed by an...
The German who ordered the elimination routes. Okay. Norwegians are real chads. Yeah, they are.
Attempted counterattack. Unfortunately for the Norwegians, though, these weren't regular riflemen. They were elite airborne troops who, without missing a beat, shifted fire to the flanking force, throwing it back, and then they followed with a direct assault. But the Norwegian troops held strong. They kept the fight going for well over an hour, with each side both gaining and losing fire superiority several times over the course of the engagement. Eventually, though, something had to give, and in the end, it would be the invaders. A well-placed rifle round...
Olaf Hell said, "No one threatens His Majesty in the presence of the King's Court."
Seriously wounded Hauptmann Spiller, while the Norwegians executed an absolutely textbook fighting withdrawal to the north. Their quarry escaping and their commander dying, the Germans remounted their remaining vehicles and headed back to Oslo. This battle, while tiny, was truly decisive. So much so, there is a national monument to it that stands to this day, while Olaf Helseth would eventually become Norway's head of defense. The heroics of this small cadre of less than 100 Norwegians allowed their parliament to escape, form a quorum, and formally organize a wartime government, all while allowing the head of state to get to safety, boosting the morale of the nation, and beginning the process of a fight back. Yet far to the north, in an isolated but vital fjord, that fight back had already begun.
Okay, oh my god, I am bad with that font. Is that a... Okay, this is definitely nonsense, so this is an N. Narvik nonsense? Narvik nonsense. Narvik. Okay, that is an R. Got it?
After shaking off the exceptionally belligerent HMS Glowworm with the aid of Admiral Hipper, the first destroyer flotilla made it to Narvik in one piece and remarkably on time. And with the help of a secret Kriegsmarine base in the Northern Soviet Union, codenamed Base Nord,
definitely not allies here.
They had covertly pre-positioned civilian refueling tankers in the port, just to make sure they had a quick turnaround time. So all they had to do was drop off their invasion force, that being the Austrian 139th Regiment of Mountain Troops, or the Gebirgsjägers, refuel their ships and then bug out back to sea in order to rejoin with the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, who had tagged along just in case home fleet showed up. The Gebirgsjägers, meanwhile, were to seize the town of Narvik itself and then immediately move to secure the rail bridge to Sweden. After all, the entire purpose of the invasion was to secure a warm water transit route for Swedish iron ore through Norwegian ports. If they didn't take this objective, the entire plan is quite literally derailed. Yeah? Come on, that one was good too. Give it to me, please.
Yeah.
Once they had actually seized and secured their objectives, they would dig in and then wait for airlifted reinforcements from the south, which by then should be under their control. This would quickly be followed by a mechanized force coming up from Oslo, securing the rest of the country on the way. Just as Falkenhorst envisioned, a lot of moving parts, but very simple in concept. But of course, like all military plans, it never survives first contact with the enemy, and worse still, this plan would prove that the only general more dangerous to the Germans than General Winter is Field Marshal Murphy. His law is as absolute as it is terrifying, and everything was about to go wrong. Upon approaching the mouth to the fjord, the destroyers encountered the Norwegian Navy's Narvik perimeter patrol. Just like the one in Oslo, this small force was comprised of 3 converted trawlers providing early warning. They managed to seize the 3 ships without combat, but not before one of them transmitted an attack warning to the 2 coastal defense ships guarding Narvik, a pair of clapped-out 40-year-old British gunboats. Realizing they'd probably been compromised, the German destroyers fanned out quickly and deposited the first wave of Gebirgsjägers to clear out suspected coastal batteries in the fjord. There actually weren't any coastal defense batteries, but they didn't know that at the time, and as experiences down south demonstrate, it was definitely a good idea. What mattered is they had troops ashore and the initiative. Advantage Kriegsmarine, so it seemed. It was hoped they could avoid a fight like they had with the patrol craft, so a preemptive move was the wisest course.
Good old Grand Admiral Murphy, the one officer who no one accounts for ever. Yeah.
Then, out of the murky mist of the early morning, came our 12th Norwegian GIGACHADS.
Holy shit.
Captain Odd Isaacson Willoch of the Norwegian ship Eidsvold.
With like name, second name, and a surname, you can bet he's a GIGACHAD.
Who immediately ordered the flotilla of 10 modern destroyers to turn about immediately or face the consequences. When the Germans didn't stop, he promptly fired a warning shot from the 8.3-inch main battery across the bow of the lead ship.
A quote-unquote warning shot from an 8-inch gun. 8-inch, like, let me convert that into metric. Yeah, I'm still using metric logic. Never mind. Like 12-inch. It's roughly 25mm, but for a ship, yeah, it's a little smaller, but still pretty impressive.
This got their attention. The commander of the flotilla, Commodore Friedrich Bonte, following his orders to attempt a peaceful occupation, ordered his ship stop.
Peaceful occupation, and that is in diameter. Yeah. Peaceful occupation. Peaceful occupation. Yeah, I believe that.
To halt and signaled the Norwegians that he was sending an officer to negotiate. Soon after, Korvettenkaptein Grek was standing on the bridge of the Eidsvold, asking Captain Willoch to surrender. They were hopelessly outgunned, and as they speak, Oslo was more than likely coming under occupation. Captain Willoch replied that he would need to consult his commanding officer, our 13th Norwegian GIGACHAD, Captain Per Askim, aboard the Norwegian ship Norge, before making any decisions. Yet as this conversation was taking place, the radio
Should I start the dying of laughter now or later? Depends. We will see what's the time. Maybe I will die of laughter too. Who knows?
operator aboard was already relaying everything. Even as the German officer was still pleading his case, orders came back almost immediately. Open fire.
Oh.
After reading the message slip handed to him, Willoch nodded his assent to the radio operator, turned to Kaptein Grek, and politely but firmly refused. If they wanted a country that surrenders, they'd have to look elsewhere. As the now enemy officer returned to his ship,
You say peaceful occupation. Should I start the dying of laughter now or later? It's better now. Because the words peaceful occupation holds the same weight as the words peaceful Sharia. Like, look at Dak from a few streams ago. It broke him apart. So you better die of laughter now before it breaks you too.
Captain Willoch ordered a red flare be fired to signal the start of hostilities. He then turned and roared at the top of his voice, "All ahead full and man the guns. We're gonna fight, boys." Eidsvold's
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Exactly.
engines roared to life as the bow swung towards the Kriegsmarine flagship, Z-21 Wilhelm Heidknapp, closing on the Germans to within 300 meters. However, Commodore Bonte had been expecting this since the negotiations had dragged on with no sign of capitulation. 4 torpedoes slammed into the Eidsvold before they could even fire a shot in anger, detonating the magazine and splitting the valiant ship in half.
Oh, wow.
Only 8 of her crew would survive to be rescued.
Salvage scrap recovered from Eidsvold.
The rest,
what
including
a
her
name.
captain, gave their lives for Norway in the hope that they had bought their comrades some time. And they had. Norge was at battle stations and began engaging the oncoming invaders, while the local garrison was scrambling to get organized. A mixed bag of regular soldiers and reservists grabbed their kit and got organized to resist, only to be greeted by German troops already entering the town.
Oh shit.
Thinking fast, the officer in charge, our 14th Norwegian GIGACHAD,
Oh my.
Major Sigurd Omdal, led his band of approximately 250 men out of the town. He was even stopped by the Germans on the way, only to bluff his way past.
What?
He knew what they were here for, and he made his way to the bridge into Sweden as fast as his men could march. There were emergency demolition charges rigged to it. As long as he got there first, they'd be able to deny the enemy their prize. Meanwhile, back in port, Norge put up a brave but hopeless resistance. They managed to buy time for a pair of submarines to escape, but not much else. The German destroyers didn't even take the threat seriously, pulling in to unload their troops before firing. They dismantled the coastal defense ship with a well-placed volley of torpedoes without taking any...
I also love that Animarchy is putting like Orchestra Sabaton into the video. It is awesome and so much fitting. By the way, right now I recognize the melody. This is the Attack of the Dead Man. Just saying.
damage in return. Thankfully, though, there was no secondary detonation. Of the 191-man crew, 90 were rescued, including the captain. By 9 a.m., the Germans held the town, taking the majority of the garrison prisoner before they could get organized. Major Omdal's men were the only exception. The commander of ground troops, General Eduard Dietl, was pleased with his men's efforts. Now he could get to work unloading the pre-positioned cargo vessels while the navy refuels. He had sent an element to secure the bridge when he landed, so everything seemed to be going according to plan. When he got to the quay, however, both he and Commodore Bonte were in for a shock. Several of their transports and one of their crucial fuel tankers were missing. A good amount of their provisions and heavy equipment was just gone. Unbeknownst to either commander, they had run afoul of the Royal Navy and the Norwegian ship Nordnapp. The German sailors having haplessly blundered into Operation Wilfred and some now very angry Nords. This was a disaster. They only had one oiler to fuel all 10 of their destroyers, and it wasn't even a dedicated replenishment vessel. It was, like a lot of Kriegsmarine shipping, a converted civilian freighter. It would take them over 24 hours to do. And then it got worse. Reports came back from the force sent to take the rail bridge that Major Omdal and his men had fought the Gebirgsjägers to a standstill, successfully blowing the bridge after evacuating a considerable number of refugees into Sweden.
Try making the trains run on time now, you fascist pigs. Not bad, not bad. Nah, angry Nords, nah, I'm out, you all have fun. Yeah, same, man, same. Listen, there is no way in hell, like, scaring the North should be even scarier than pissing off the North should be even scarier than pissing off the Polish. Like, the Polish are very angry by default right nowadays, but the Nords, they are the descendants of the Vikings. They will put on their horned helmet, they will pull up their wooden ship, they will put your body on the spike of that shield and use you as a human meat shield. Like, the Nords, they're next level.
While another unit of Norwegians had mobilized in time to defend Narvik's nearest airfield, forcing the Germans back. Their primary objective had just gone up in smoke, while suffering casualties his now isolated and beleaguered force could ill afford.
Go Sintis over. Never piece of the Canadians, then the North, then the Polish. You know, I cannot disagree with that. Yeah, true. First of the Canadians, because then the Canadians will stop saying sorry. They will fucking use your toothpaste. They will put poison into your toothpaste. It will be that scary.
Meanwhile, Commodore Bonte was now getting terrifying updates from the rest of Naval Group 1. Battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau had started transmitting contact
Geneva
reports,
enough said, yeah.
and they had run into none other than the battlecruiser HMS Renown and her task force,
Oh, hello
who
there.
were now demonstrating Royal Navy gunnery firsthand, crippling Gneisenau's fire control system with a direct hit. The Germans knew that this could only mean one thing. If there was a British capital ship hanging around, there was bound to be more. And it was now time to f***ing leave. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau made smoke and ran for it, while the destroyers in Narvik frantically started refueling. But that would take time. And it was becoming rapidly apparent to everyone that time was the one thing they just didn't have. In the deep, dingy basement of Admiralty House in London, the senior leaders of the Royal Navy had now started to piece together the situation.
Okay.
Hitler hadn't missed the bus, he was in fact driving it, and they needed to act fast. The ships assigned to Operation Wilfred were now tasked to seek and destroy all German shipping in Norwegian waters to prevent further landings, as well as to distract the Allied public from yet another unfolding disaster. One of the biggest knock-on effects, as implied by my reference to his quote, was the political position of Neville Chamberlain. After the Munich Agreement's failure to prevent the war, and now this whole Scandinavian shitshow, his ability to lead was not just questioned, it was outright rejected, with one senior MP heckling him in the House of Commons, "For God's sake, just go." Nevertheless, something had to be salvaged from this situation, and so the men originally stood down from Operation R4 were hastily recalled and re-equipped, while Royal Navy fleet units scrambled en masse with orders to be as aggressive as practically possible. It would take a while for them to arrive though, so for now, it was down to the ships already on the scene to respond. The closest ones to the area being the 2nd Destroyer Flotilla, under the command of our 2nd British GIGACHAD, Captain Bernard Armitage Warburton Lee. Now he gets Chad
Now that's a name. Hello there.
points for the name alone, obviously. But it would be his actions on April 10th that would put him into the history books. He had received word from the Admiralty that a single German warship had taken Narvik, while he'd also heard that Renown engaged Scharnhorst and Gneisenau nearby. The situation was very confused. No one had any idea what was happening, beyond the fact that Norway was half occupied, and defecation had collided with oscillation in a most spectacular fashion. This wasn't enough to make plans around. Hell, it wasn't even enough to improvise around. There was no way the Germans took a defended port with just one ship. Even the dreaded battleship Bismarck they'd been hearing all those rumours about couldn't carry enough marines to defeat the town's garrison, which obviously means the Germans have more than one ship. But just how many more? They had to find out, of course. But they didn't have any recon aircraft available, and even if they did, the weather was absolutely god-awful. There was a snowstorm brewing in the area overnight, so there was really only one thing for it. They had to go ask the locals. And so the British anchored off the coast in the middle of the night.
Notification has collided with oscillation. Okay, shit has hit the fan. Okay.
To drop off a shore party who promptly went to a nearby town on the mouth of Narvik's fjord and asked what was going on. And I am sure you can see the problem.
Yeah.
None of them could speak any Norwegian. And the Norwegians couldn't speak English.
Of course.
But not to worry. After some awkward pointing, sign language, and a few English Scandinavian loanwords, they eventually worked out that at least 6 German destroyers were anchored in Narvik harbour, alongside cargo ships full of supplies for the Wehrmacht, who had seized the town and the local rail net. Now, Captain Warburton Lee only had 5 H-class destroyers: Hardy, Hotspur, Havoc, Hunter, and Hostile. Man,
5 times H. Not bad.
British ship names are so cool.
Yeah.
All we do in Australia and the United States is name them after people or places and battles occasionally. But yes.
Except for the Enterprise. The Enterprise is one hell of a good name, in my opinion. And even then, I bet it was named after a person, right? Maybe. I don't know.
He was outnumbered by the force in Narvik, and the two biggest and baddest German battleships in service were lurking somewhere nearby. The logical choice would be to rejoin with the heavy fleet units and get ready for a decisive battle. But Captain Warburton Lee didn't want a decisive battle, because he was a decisive man. The enemy is in port. They've been on constant duty for at least 48 hours, and with their battleships out front, they probably feel really secure. Calling his men to battle stations, the 2nd Destroyer Flotilla of the Royal Navy formed up and entered Narvik's fjord under the cover of a snowstorm. They would attack at dawn. The visibility was
Good
appalling,
morning,
so
bitch.
much so that the British ships broke radio silence to accurately navigate through the rocky and craggy coastline of the fjord. However, the German sailors who were on duty were in their refueling evolution, while most of them were asleep.
Oh yeah, of little knowledge, the Enterprise dates back to the Revolutionary War and the Barbary Wars. Damn.
Including Commodore Bonte himself. Because they were so undermanned, no one was listening in on known Royal Navy frequencies, as was normal standard procedure. The zero visibility conditions obscured the vision of the U-boats, who were supposed to be the outer picket providing security. In fact, it was bad enough that the German destroyer guarding the main channel of the fjord had returned to refuel, as maintaining their post was essentially pointless, as no one would be insane enough or stupid enough to launch an attack in these conditions. Oh, how wrong they were. As the sun broke the horizon, the British saw the reported 6 German destroyers tied alongside the pier, along with their cargo vessels being slowly and methodically unloaded. Refueling operations were still proceeding at pace, and the German lookouts were scanning the area. But mainly, they were just trying to stay warm. It was then they saw the shadowy shapes of warships coming out of the gloom, and on closer inspection, they definitely weren't Kriegsmarine types. The lead ship, in fact, looked a lot closer than the others, and it seemed to be raising a battle oh, shite.
Oh shit! Yeah, it's the fucking Brits. Lol. Back then there were some insane mad lads. True, and what the hell was that?
Before the alarm could be raised, the flagship, Wilhelm Heidkamp, was rocked by a torpedo hit from HMS Hardy, starting a fire which ignited the aft ammunition magazine. The subsequent explosion blew the rear of the ship completely off, killing Commodore Bonte along with half of the crew. The German flotilla had been decapitated in the opening salvo, and chaos reigned in the harbour. Everyone thought it was an air raid at first, but HMS Hunter would quickly set the record straight on that score. 4.7-inch shells started raining down on the ships at anchor as more silvery torpedo wakes stormed towards the German destroyer Z-22 Anton Schmidt. An explosion near the bow rocked the ship as icy cold Norwegian waters rushed in. But their problems were only just beginning, as our third British GIGACHAD enters the fray. Lieutenant Commander Rafe E. Courage. Yes, really.
Captain Courage! You can bet he's a GIGACHAD with such a last name.
Rafe E. Courage. Captain of HMS Havoc. And Havoc was the perfect name. Torpedoes and main gun rounds went...
Episode Courageous Havoc, right here, right fucking here.
Flying at almost every single ship in the harbour. One of the torpedoes struck Z-22 directly amidships, splitting the destroyer in half. While causing such a catastrophic explosion, the shockwave knocked out the engines and electrical systems of destroyer Z-17 anchored nearby. Narvik Harbour was now a maelstrom of burning infernos and sinking ships. The Germans' cargo vessels were all shattered and sinking by their peers, with the only exception being, ironically, their fuel tanker.
The GIGACHAD makes me flying in the British camp, yeah.
Probably due to the fact it was parked...
Names, damn. The GIGACHAD names be flying in the British camp, yeah. True, so true.
...near the destroyers, and those ships could shoot back, making them a far more pressing target.
Ooh.
And speaking of shooting back, now the Kriegsmarine were awake, and an almighty gunfight at close range broke out. Ships on both sides started taking serious damage. Z-17, unable to move, was forced to act as a floating gun battery. She ended up taking an absolute pummeling from HMS Hostile, so much so that the resulting fires forced the crew to evacuate to the pier and fight the fires from on shore. But Hostile didn't escape unscathed herself. She took hits from the other German destroyers who had started getting underway. Captain Warburton Lee, seeing that his attack had been a success, ordered his ships to pull back into the fjord to regroup.
And we are now at over 20 gigachat, lol, yeah. 23 if I'm not mistaken, right? Or 24 even.
He had evened the odds by hitting first, and now it was time to settle this with a stand-up fight, something the Royal Navy had proven to be very good at. But he had been operating on faulty intelligence, for we know that the German destroyer flotilla that took Narvik wasn't 6 ships, but 10.
Oh.
The other German ships had been dispersed throughout the different inlets in the fjord to guard against air attack, all while freeing up as much pier space as possible for unloading and reprovisioning. And the British had sailed right past them. As the weather started to clear, dawn turned into day, revealing the unseen and undamaged Kriegsmarine vessels at full combat readiness, steaming at full speed to cut off their escape.
Oh shit.
It was time to leave, and they would have to fight their way out. With orders to make smoke, the British formed a battle column and charged down the German ships, who at that moment were crossing the T in front of them. Realizing their escape route was now blocked, Captain Warburton Lee transmitted a message to all ships. Keep engaging the enemy.
Oh yes.
It would be his
I reject your reality and substitute my own. 23
last act as a
gigachats.
commander, and his last act on Earth.
Yep, the same weather that kept them let them launch the attack covered the other 4 German ships.
Warburton Lee transmitted a message to all ships. Keep engaging the enemy. It would be his last act as a commander, and his last act on Earth. The Germans were in a much better position with a fresh crew. A full broadside from Z2 Georg Thiel smashed into HMS Hardy's bridge, killing the command team as well as the bridge officers of the ship.
Oh shit.
Only one of the officers survived. Of all people, it was the paymaster, Lieutenant Geoffrey Stanning, whose first instinct was to ram Z2 in retaliation. But the constant fusillade of fire had knocked out their weapons and damaged the ship to such an extent it wouldn't be practical. Heavily wounded, with his remaining strength, he conned the ship onto the shore of the fjord and successfully beached it, saving the lives of the remaining crew on board.
The 24 gigajet in the story. The only HR rep who will ever get this award. He was an HR person? Also, not your average pay monkey. Not bad for an HR representative.
Definitely a mad lad.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, HMS Hotspur was burning fiercely, and HMS Hunter had taken serious torpedo damage. They had managed to force their way past the Germans, but at serious cost to themselves. The situation was looking dire. It was then that Captain Rafe Courage once again began living up to his name by covering the escape of the surviving ships, by making a smokescreen, and then charging down the now pursuing Kriegsmarine, all guns blazing. Sadly...
no jokes for this one. His name is literally Captain Courage. He's the main character by default. Yeah, just courage by courage. That's it.
They couldn't save HMS Hunter, but the heroics of HMS Havoc and her captain scared the Germans off, allowing everyone else to escape. And the final cherry on top of this operation? You know the massive cargo ship bringing the next batch of crucial supplies to the Gebirgsjägers in Narvik?
Yeah.
That cargo ship ran headlong into the British as they were leaving, quickly being dispatched by HMS Havoc's guns. As the fires were put out and the dust settled, 2 German destroyers were sunk. 7 supply ships were sunk, 4 other destroyers were heavily damaged, one of which being beyond repair, while the commodore of the entire naval operation was blown into itty-bitty pieces. The British, meanwhile, had lost 2 destroyers, suffered heavy damage to a third, and lost their captain. However, he would go down in history not just for this event, but for the very first Victoria Cross awarded in the Second World War.
Damn.
Back on shore, General Dietl was now faced with a terrible situation. His supplies were gone, the rail line he was sent all the way up here to get had been blown up, a third of his naval force was gone, and he was getting word from headquarters that the bad weather, combined with much heavier losses than originally expected, would prevent the Luftwaffe from sending him back up anytime soon. Not that he had an airfield for them to land at. Worse still, the Norwegians who had blown up the bridge had linked up with the force defending the airfield, as well as still more Norwegian troops who have answered the call for mobilization.
Nice.
They were even now getting themselves organized to retake Narvik from the invaders. He had to get help. Getting the Luftwaffe back on the line, he demanded they send help. There was a frozen lake nearby they could try and land on. They didn't even need
Not
reinforcements.
the best idea on the planet. Also considering that this is winter, right? So maybe in theory you can, but I would not recommend it.
What they needed was supplies. Realizing just how bad the situation was for the stranded Gebirgsjägers, frantic efforts were made to retrofit a squadron of Ju-52s with extra long-range fuel tanks. But that would take at least 24 to 48 hours, so it wouldn't be until the 13th of April that flights could come out. The Germans spent the 12th of April licking their wounds and counting the dead. A British recon aircraft...
Wait, and all of that in the span of a few days, am I getting that right? Like, all of that happening in the same, 2 to 3 days, right? Jesus.
Fleet air arm flew over taking a look at the aftermath of the previous day's battle, but no bombs fell. However, that aircraft only had one engine, meaning it was a carrier aircraft. This was a rather ominous sign. Though as the sun rose over Narvik Fjord on April 13th, news came down from Fliegerkorps 10 that the modifications to the transports had been completed and that the Luftwaffe was on the way. Furthermore, the Wehrmacht had gotten some of its heavier gear ashore down south and were at that very moment marching north to relieve them. It would take a lot of time marching across the hinterland of mountainous Norway, yet help was coming. But not soon enough. As the Gebirgsjägers started getting organized to receive their resupply, the Kriegsmarine was still struggling to get their refueling done while patching the damage done by Warburton Lee and his men.
What in the boss music am I hearing right now?
And it was then, softly in the distance, though steadily getting louder, they heard music, as though it was passing through the fabric of time itself, similar to the rumbling trumpet phenomena you occasionally hear near low-pressure weather system. Only this was distinctly music. It was then a dark, shadowy shape loomed up the fjord, escorted by an entire fleet of destroyers and a squadron of aircraft. The large, shadowy figure began signaling.
Hello.
The signal read, "I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me."
Holy shit. HMS HMS Varsby. HMS Warspite?
HMS Warspite, the grand old lady, queen of the seas, had entered the fjord undaunted. Such close-in and narrow waters were thought to be
HMS
too
Warspite.
dangerous for a force of this size. But the men of the Royal Navy never back away from a challenge in seamanship, as we've established. Captain Bay, leader of the German flotilla, ordered his ships to push up and engage the enemy in open waters, only to suddenly realize that Warspite was coming to meet them. In a twist of amusing irony, the words of Admiral Farragut were most appropriate. Damn the torpedoes! Full speed ahead. She had even launched her Walrus seaplane, which then went and immediately sank one of the U-boats standing guard to prevent just this sort of situation, marking the first submarine sunk by aircraft in World War II.
Damn.
The other U-boat couldn't get into position to shoot because Warspite had taken the only part of the fjord deep enough for them to safely attack. The gunners aboard the Grand Old Lady immediately went to work. Within minutes, her 15-inch guns began murdering German destroyers.
15
It was
inch.
only by a miracle that they managed to hang in the fight. Near misses inflicting shock damage while raining shrapnel and shell fragments across their decks. The British destroyers began
Warspite and its crew. I despise the hardship of war, but I'm really damn good at it.
flinging torpedoes at anything still floating,
Shit.
while HMS Furious's air wing flew in overhead, dropping bombs and strafing. The German commander, out of ammo, out of fuel, and cornered by the angriest ship in the Royal Navy, made the toughest choice a fleet commander can make. He ordered his vessels to be beached or scuttled.
Oh.
With that order, Destroyer Group 1 met its end.
Holy
The German
shit.
sailors began detonating their scuttling charges or ramming their ships ashore. Once they were certain that their ship was out of action, they abandoned ship. Meanwhile, with their work handily done, the Royal Navy withdrew in good order, without having lost a single ship and only suffering minor shell damage. Their only significant losses were 2 aircraft shot down during the engagement.
Ouch.
As the victorious British sailed away, Captain Crutchley, our 4th British Gigachad, and Captain of Warspite, was heard to remark, "It was just like shelling peas."
Damn.
General
Captain Crutchley sinks German fleet, drops one liner, refuses to elaborate, and leaves. The 27th gigashot of this story.
Dietel quickly went down to the port and organized the now shipless sailors into naval infantry units.
By the way, speaking of a gigashot, look at this immaculate beard. He cannot not be a gigashot with such a glorious beard.
It was just like shelling peas. General Dietel quickly went down to the port and organized the now shipless sailors into naval infantry units, sending them down to the frozen lake in preparation to unload their resupply aircraft. At this point, he was probably thinking it just couldn't get any worse. But as we know, it most definitely could.
Yeah.
His airlift arrived. Only one of our heroes from earlier, unfortunately I couldn't find out which one, had intercepted the flight in his Gladiator, shooting one of them down.
Man's got both the gigachad jawline and facial hair, exactly.
One had intercepted the flight in his Gladiator, shooting one of them down.
Damn. Unknown Norwegian pilot, Godspeed, you magnificent bastard.
3 more transports crashed on landing, while the
Damn.
rest froze into the ice while they were being unloaded. And it was at that precise moment the Norwegians, who had gotten reorganized, chose to counterattack in force and seize the lake back, taking half the supplies, as well as capturing and subsequently destroying all their aircraft.
Damn.
It was now at about this point, with all these calamities stacking up on one another, that General Hans Giesler and General von Falkenhorst decided that they would need to take drastic action. The Fallschirmjäger units down south, their mission complete, had reorganized, and in an effort to speed up their advance from Oslo and link up all their forces, they were dropped in the area of Donbass. No, not that one, this one. A crucial rail junction between Oslo and Trondheim.
Okay.
However, like in a mini Operation Market Garden, the weather was so bad half of them crashed. The other half got scattered to hell when they did drop, and they dropped in the wrong place, straight into an entire division of Norwegians assembling to repel the invaders. They were immediately surrounded and attacked relentlessly. Eventually, they would be forced to surrender, representing a major victory for the Norwegian forces and a huge blow to the Germans, who didn't have that many assets to begin with. Narvik would have to wait until the weather cleared and more German forces managed to advance far enough north so that they could airlift men in. But that could very well take weeks.
I
And
hear
wait a
that.
minute. Do you guys hear bagpipes?
Yes. The Scottish have entered the chat. Yes.
Throughout the latter half of April and into early May, the Allied Northern Expeditionary Force landed throughout the region around Narvik, linking up with the Norwegians.
The laser pig again, yeah. I will admit to another scene, I have never watched Laser Pig. I should though. With so many memes, I should watch Laserpeak at this point. It is an obligation for me now.
Scots, Irish, and Welsh were backed up by the French Foreign Legion and mountain troops from both Poland and France. And get this, the French even brought tanks. But sadly,
We will get there here one day.
as the Allies were getting organised to start going on the offensive, Hitler made his move.
Uh-oh.
On May 10th, 1940, the Germans began Case Yellow, their invasion of France and the Low Countries.
Alright.
Luftwaffe airstrikes and airborne assaults, many of which being led by the men who took Fornebu and Sola, crushed both Belgium and Holland within days, while Rommel and
shit.
Guderian began tearing through the Ardennes into the Allied rear, cutting off their best troops. The entire campaign was a fait accompli. The forces deployed to Norway represented some of the best units Britain and France had. Meanwhile, their naval assets would soon be needed to cover the planned evacuation from Dunkirk, as well as provide fleet units for the Mediterranean, as Italy seemed to be making moves to join the war. The Allies finally retook Narvik on May 27, 1940, only to turn around to the Norwegians and tell them it was so they could use it as an evacuation port.
Oh.
After all their heroics, after all that sacrifice, and the victories they had won over the Nazis, Norway was to be abandoned to its fate. As British and French soldiers fought for their lives trying to escape from Dunkirk, German panzers closing in on them while Stukas screamed overhead, their comrades 2,000 miles to the north were doing exactly the same thing, coming under air attack from approaching German forces. It was then that disaster struck. Realizing the British were on the run, the Kriegsmarine sortied Scharnhorst and Gneisenau to make a hit-and-run attack on the evacuation fleet, only to run into the aircraft carrier HMS Glorious, out of position with only a small destroyer screen for defense. The German battleships, realizing the opportunity, advanced and tore her to pieces.
Oh, fuck.
But in keeping with the aggression seen
And that is sadly the ruthless colors of war. Yeah.
in
Nothing is
Allied
pretty.
destroyer captains, HMS Ardent closed with the two offending capital ships and peppered them with 5-inch fire and torpedoes, inflicting
GIGACHADS Counter 30, Ardent and Acastas crew. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
considerable but not fatal damage.
Yeah.
With home fleet almost certainly bearing down on them at max speed to get vengeance and needing to repair their battle damage, the Germans, having sunk an aircraft carrier, decided that this was a prize worth taking and leaving. Both Scharnhorst and Gneisenau would end up terrorizing British merchant traffic during the upcoming Battle of the Atlantic. But for now, they'd done their part and needed a refit. The Norwegian government boarded HMS Devonshire at Narvik to go into exile, and by June 10th, orders were transmitted to all surviving Norwegian army units to lay down their arms. And thus, our epic story has come to an end. But although this campaign is very rarely mentioned, its effects would have immense consequences.
I can imagine that.
Neville Chamberlain, having suffered a major embarrassment of being beaten to Scandinavia by Hitler, was forced to resign his post, being replaced by Winston Churchill.
Oh, yes.
And in holding out from April 9th to June 10th, Norway was the most fiercely defiant nation of all the Allied powers. She had held out longer than any other Allied nation against German invasion. The bravery of her soldiers, sailors, and airmen inflicted irreplaceable losses on the Kriegsmarine, as well as the elite German infantry corps. And even as the order to surrender went out, half the Norwegian soldiers who survived the campaign immediately began organizing the resistance or joining Norwegian units in exile.
Nice.
It would be a group of these men who would form a special forces detachment to take out the Norsk heavy water plant, vital to Nazi atomic weapons research, while Norwegian aviators would form entire squadrons in the RAF, never tiring in their efforts to liberate their homeland. Intelligence from these pilots and their countrymen in the resistance was vital to the security of the Arctic Lend-Lease convoys, which saved the Eastern Front from a logistical and operational disaster, and it also directly led to the RAF's eventual destruction of battleship Tirpitz. Norway, as I said, is a forgotten campaign, yet I hope I have done my part to remedy that. But if there is one takeaway from this story, let it simply be this. No matter how dire it may seem, no matter how hopeless the situation is, when confronted with a fascist invader demanding your surrender, there is only one appropriate response. Fascist warship? Go f yourself.
Yeah, go fuck yourself. And punch the fascist in the teeth, as cliched as it sounds. But in that case, it's super appropriate. This film is dedicated to the over 10,000 Norwegians who gave their lives for a better world. Standing ovation. I'm standing up for that. Absolute heroes. Absolute mad lads. And the final tally 30 GIGACHADS on the counter of 7 to the Norwegian men and women who paid the ultimate price. 07. I wish I had an 07 toggle. I should have I should have thought about it. Whatever. Okay, I wonder, is there a blooper at the end? No, there's none, but it was incredible. 2.5 hours of reaction, holy shit. If you liked watching this video, don't forget to leave a like and smash the subscribe button. And if you want to see more of my annoying voice and accent, don't forget to also watch my other reaction videos and join my regularly scheduled streams on Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 1 or 2 PM OST. You may like what you find. Until next time, Steam. Sleep tight, especially at midnight. Apex out.